Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, Conrad. Great to be here with you and Mr. Silva, crack producer, helping us crank out some of the best podcasts in the history of professional wrestling, short history as it may be, nonetheless, history. So I'm loving it. I'm feeling good.
I am too, man. It's going to be a fun day. It's going to be a fun show. We're going to be talking about one of the biggest WCW pay-per-views in history as we revisit a pretty big time Super Brawl. But before we get to that, man, there's a lot of news and notes. It feels like every single day there's some other major story breaking in professional wrestling. But we are going to eventually get to Super Brawl IX. Went down in February of 1999. So 25 years ago. But I guess we should start with maybe some sad news, but some hopeful news. Keep your fingers crossed. Throw up one for our pal Mongo. Just days after he got the big news that he's going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he was rushed to the hospital, going through a blood transfusion. Looks like maybe he's got a case of MRSA. This dude has had one piece of bad news after another, but he finally got the good news he's been waiting on. He's going into the Hall of Fame, but just a few days later, Eric, damn it, he finds himself back in the fight in the hospital.
Yeah, I haven't really spoken to Steve in a year or two. And, I think about him often, particularly this time of year and with all of the conversation about the Hall of Fame. And I don't know, knowing Steve, it was important to him to be alive and to see himself get inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame. He might be ready. He's a fighter. He's got such a great attitude. Even as sick as he's been, every picture you see, he's got that Steve McMichael ear to ear smile on his face. And his sense of humor is just still so much a part of what Steve McMichael is and was on the football field and in wrestling. His sense of humor, man. He had just the best sense of humor, and to see that up until this point, at least, he hasn't lost that a bit. The disease may be ravaging his body, but nothing's gotten hold of his spirit. And it brings a smile to my face knowing that he's as tough as he is, and he got to see that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Everything else is bonus points, I think, at this point for him.
Keep your thoughts and prayers with Mongo and his lovely wife and their whole family, because, man, I sure would love for him to still be with us when he gets to see the ceremony. Let's talk about some WWE news. We are just days away, as you and I are recording this, from Elimination Chamber, the first of what's going to be several international PLEs for WWE this year. We should start with talking about SmackDown this past weekend. Bron Breakker is now officially on the main roster. And we knew this was coming, but we didn't know in storyline, will he wind up on Friday night? Or will he wind up on Monday night? Well, Friday Night SmackDown is the home for Bron Breakker. This is a long time coming. What do you think you expect to see from Bron Breakker on the main roster?
I haven't watched Bron enough to be able to anticipate what we might see out of his character and where he might be positioned on SmackDown. What I have seen, I'm so excited for him. Obviously, there's a connection there, not so much with Bron, but with his father, and long-standing relationship. Great guy. Spent a lot of time away from the wrestling business with his father, Rick, and a lot of great memories in history. So because of that connection, obviously, I'm a huge Bron Breakker fan. I will be, regardless, and just excited for him. Just excited. So another Steiner in the wrestling business. Oh boy.
I can't wait, man. Huge fans of his dad's. And of course, I know you got to know Scott pretty well through your time in WCW. So we're all going to be pulling for Bron Breakker. I hope that they've got him in a pretty important spot for WrestleMania. And you assume for them to make this sort of debut and it being advance of WrestleMania, we're going to see him there. But somebody else fighting for their spot at WrestleMania, several somebodies, are the participants in this weekend's Elimination Chamber. Don't forget, that's going to air while you're asleep this Friday night / Saturday morning. It is going to be live from Perth, Australia, and inside the Elimination Chamber structure itself, we've got Kevin Owens, LA Knight, Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, Bobby Lashley, and Logan Paul. Yes, the US champion is inside the Elimination Chamber, and they're going to be vying for a shot at Seth Rollins' World Heavyweight Championship. So now we know it's going to be one of these fellows in there with Seth. As you take a look at that graphic, Eric, we know for sure that Logan Paul wrestled Seth Rollins last year. There were no titles on the line. Seth was not the World Heavyweight Champion, and Logan was not the US champion. So maybe we're going to get title versus title if it's Logan. But if it's not Logan, is it LA Knight's time? Is it Drew McIntyre's time? Is it someone else?
Yeah. And if you could leave that graphic up, Mr. Silva, I appreciate it. As I look at this, again, we've been talking the last couple of weeks about options, right? There's so many great options. You've got such a deep talent roster at the top, so many different ways to go. But I think, I don't know, man. Drew just feels like he's been getting, I don't want to call it a push, but little nudge here and there every week in the right direction. Just seems to be more and more prominent in the conversation. LA Knight was already there. Do you continue to elevate him? Do you continue to turn up the volume on LA Knight? It would make sense business-wise. You'd have all the reasons to, I don't want to say justify it, but you'd have all the reasons to support that idea if you were pitching that in a meeting, because the momentum is there. The audience is there. Kevin Owens, though, Kevin is always a go-to. Kevin will deliver every single time. And it seems like we haven't heard a lot from Kevin lately. Granted, I haven't been watching the show religiously, and I drop in when I hear about what's going on, or I follow up and watch a show after it's aired to kind of get caught up on details. So I may not be aware of conversation regarding Kevin, and he may be getting a little more attention than I'm seeing, given my passive viewership.
He's been in a feud with Logan Paul.
All right. Then it doesn't seem to me like that would make sense. I don't know. I would have to say, for me, it would be LA Knight or Drew be my pick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hope for one that this is LA Knight's time and we see the whole crowd going bananas for him. But it does feel like lately we've been positioning Seth as a bit more of a baby face. So Drew's probably the guy who gets the nod. And
what's been going on with Bobby Lashley?
Treading water a little bit.
Treading water?
I think he and AJ Styles are big names to have on the roster that are just sort of there right now. I don't think they're a focus. I could be mistaken on that, but that's my read anyway.
Yeah, I would go with LA Knight then. I think just the momentum seems to be on his side.
Well, I guess what I was talking about, I mean, we do know that Logan Paul and Kevin Owens hooked it up at the Royal Rumble. So I don't think that's necessarily there for a rematch. I mean, I guess stranger things have happened. I could see Logan Paul for the interest of having, an influencer, but that probably makes sense for him to be set up for somebody else as a result of them, quote unquote, costing him this match or something like that. But since Seth has been positioned a little bit more like a babyface lately and sticking up for Cody and all that sort of thing, maybe you need someone who's going to play the heel for him. And I'm okay if that's Drew McIntyre. I mean, when he won the world title years ago at WrestleMania, it was sadly the COVID WrestleMania. So not that there's going to be a big celebration for a heel winning, but I could see it. I'm anxious to see what they do with the women too. We know Rhea Ripley is going to be taking on Nia Jax down in Perth. There's going to be a women's elimination chamber. The winner will take on Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania. The other big piece of business that everybody's going to be talking about this weekend at Elimination Chamber are not just the actual chamber matches themselves, but it was announced since we recorded most recently, Eric, that Seth Rollins is going to be joined by Cody Rhodes on the Grayson Waller effect. This is a modern day Piper's Pit talking segment. So Seth and Cody are taking a 25-hour flight to do an interview. Wait a minute. I smell what you're cooking. I mean, this is where The Rock's going to be here, and we're going to announce the tag match for night one, right?
Seems that way, doesn't it?
I mean, it feels like it's right there that's where we make the match official. And there's been lots of speculation, certainly even in the Observer, that night one will be a tag match, Rock and Roman against Cody and Seth. But now all the conspiracy theories are out because we saw The Rock's promo at Friday Night SmackDown, where perhaps people are saying, hey, wait a minute. When he talked about losing, he pointed to Roman, and he never specifically said anyone's name when he was talking about anyone losing. And when he held up the one at the end of the night, pose with the bloodline, he was holding up an L, not a number one like everybody else. So people are saying, oh man, maybe The Rock is a double agent. Doesn't want to be part of the bloodline and is actually supporting Cody. And this is part of the big plan. He's not just going to take the world title. He's going to take everything. So listen, the snot thickens. That's what makes wrestling fun, right? When you can't call it exactly.
And there's so many little nuances or nuggets, if you will, that are being embedded in this story that create the speculation. Mm-hmm. What if you conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, the speculation.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different ways this could go, and the intrigue, the way this whole thing was laid out and it's developing, it's creating so much conversation that I don't know, is it fair to say that this may be the most buzz that WWE's ever had going into a WrestleMania? It feels like it because, well, social media helps that, right? There wasn't social media back in WrestleMania 3 or WrestleMania 1 or WrestleMania 5, whatever. But now we've got such interesting, creative, you've got Rock coming in. People have been speculating about Rock getting involved in a WrestleMania for how many years now?
Right.
There's probably been 4 or 5 where Rock's been a conversation, both internally and externally amongst the fans, internally amongst WWE corporate, about Rock's involvement in WrestleMania, but scheduling and conflicts and, being a movie star has always been a conflict. Now he's here and there's so many different ways this could go. And you layer that on top of the fact that, as excited as I am about everything, it started off as kind of a bobble, behind the line of scrimmage. That ball was bouncing around a little bit in the backfield before they really advanced it with the story that we have now. And even with that bobble or that fumble, if you will, creatively, they've recovered nicely and are moving downfield towards WrestleMania. So it's going to be interesting to see where this thing goes, given the subtle nuances in the story as you just laid out. And I'm trying to think about what do they do after WrestleMania. That's really where my head tends to stay in these situations. You see what's going on and you try to anticipate what's going to happen at WrestleMania. But I spend a lot of my time thinking, but what after? What's Rock going to be doing after WrestleMania? What's his commitment? We know he's committed to WrestleMania. We know he's on the board of directors, but what's his ongoing commitment? Is it going to be a permanent fixture or a regular fixture, perhaps in a authority type of a role, or is he going to stay active? It's just going to be real. When I say active, I mean in the ring. It's going to be fascinating to find out. I love it. I love trying to anticipate what they're doing creatively, because obviously they're working very hard. The fact that they're paying attention now to little details and planting these little Easter eggs in the stories, hell, it's fun.
No doubt it's fun. And it was really fun seeing The Rock embrace that heel persona. He is our Blue Chew Stiff One of the Week this week. That heel promo that he cut on SmackDown, where he teased the audience by saying that they had just set an attendance record, not only for this city or this building, but for the whole state. The largest gathering of trailer park trash in the history of Utah.
Wow.
Really, really great stuff. An old school Rock promo, a heel Hollywood Rock promo, and pretending, at least for now, to be a member of the bloodline. just 2 weeks after he was nose to nose with Roman. He's on their side. Felt a little nation of domination right there at the end, except maybe there's some clues there. I liked the pivot to heel Rock. I know that people love his catchphrases and they want to scream it out like it's a Rocky Horror Picture Show participation. I get that. But goodness gracious, heel Rock. Good stuff, man. I enjoyed it.
I didn't think I'd see that, to be honest with you. At this stage of Rock's career, I would have, and again, I don't know Dwayne Johnson at all. We never really had a conversation, so I don't know what makes him tick. But at this stage of his career, it surprises me that he would fully embrace that heel role. I'm glad he did. The audience obviously digs it. It's taken him back to 1999, I guess, kind of a heel Rock era at that point. So the audience is digging it. I'm just relatively surprised. I mean, there was talk a couple months ago about him exploring the idea of running for president. I think that's probably out the window.
Yeah.
He won't be campaigning anytime soon in Utah, but who knows? We'll see.
I wanted to ask you, when you think about the way they've done this pivot, what score would you give them? Like, clearly this wasn't the original plan, but it feels like they've got a lot of momentum after the pivot. If you were a school teacher and you're grading their work here, how have they pulled off the pivot to you? What score would they earn?
Well, definitely an A+ for effort, because that was a hell of a bobble.
Yeah.
And a hell of a pivot. And to be able to recover it all, I think it gets them an automatic B. And given the nuances and some of the details and the focus on creating anticipation, because that's what this is all about. We know we're going to get the action. We've got pretty solid story. The reality of this situation, given even just the basic premise for Cody Rhodes, finishing the story, that's real. That's based on actual events regarding his father, Dusty, and thinking he was going to get the championship and then having it in his hands, but you didn't really get it. I mean, that's all real. This is a scripted story based on reality in a sense. The surprise, surprising enough that Rock showed up on the scene in the middle of it all, so they got that covered. So the 5 elements that it takes to make a great story are all there. They've checked the box, but it seems like they're turning up the volume on the anticipation so much that effort gets me up into a B+ or an A- type of grade, I think, for where they are currently. We'll see how it evolves, but how would you not give your students a B+ to an A-, not only for the pivot, but for the details, the story, and the attention to detail that this is getting so far, and the fact that they're giving themselves a couple different options to get out of it, or to end it, I should say, not get out of it. That makes it sound like a burden. They'll have an opportunity to end this story, this movie called WrestleMania, any number of different ways at this point.
Let's talk about a few other news and notes, and then we'll get into our topic today, Super Brawl from 25 years ago. Jennifer Pepperman departed WWE recently. She was a writer, been with the company since 2017, so she actually predated you and Bruce before y'all went back to WWE. Did you ever work with her during your time in WWE, and what'd you think of Jennifer, if so?
We became pretty good friends.
Wow.
And still are. She is an amazing writer, but an even more amazing person. She is tough. When I say tough, I mean she can work under pressure as well or better than on anybody that I've worked with. She doesn't get rattled. And I saw her in some situations where a lot of people would have crumbled. And she's strong, she's tough, she's extremely talented, and just a great person to be around. I was frankly surprised.
What does that mean?
What does what mean?
You said you were frankly surprised.
I was frankly surprised to see that she was leaving. I see. she was really, I'm sorry, I should have finished the sentence because that could have been misleading, which is why you were confused. But no, she was so good, she's so talented, so tough. I'm surprised that she's leaving, but again, because she is talented, I know she was interested in writing. She was working on a movie script, um, at least a year or two ago, and I think she's probably leaning that direction. She's been around wrestling now for 7 years, a long time. That's like 2 lifetimes in any other business, especially at the level she was working at. So I understand it. She's got, I think she's got a son in college. She's living in New York and commuting into Connecticut all the time, so that's tough. So maybe she's just looking for a transition, but I can't say enough good things about her. Jen Pepperman was a just amazing writer and is an amazing person, and I would love the opportunity to work with people like her day of the week. So I'm sure she's going to do well.
Man, I love when we get to give somebody their flowers here. One of the unsung heroes behind the scenes, getting a little praise here early on 83 weeks. Let's talk about another announcement that came out. The WWE and UFC together, of course, are known as TKO. They've announced a live event deal between both the UFC and WWE running in the same arena in the same time frame. It's Anaheim's Honda Center. They're promising 3 live events from both companies through 2028. Now, this isn't really that big of news, I suppose, but it's the first time we've seen or we've heard of a deal being structured like this. But it makes a lot of sense. Like if you can have one touring manager or one touring department who's scouting buildings and trying to negotiate for the best deals, then you can sometimes get a better deal if you promise tonnage. So here's a price for one show, but what if we did 2 or what if we did 3? And what if I could, fill up your calendar a little more? Could you be a little more favorable? But you don't necessarily want to do that if you're just one brand because, well, you might burn out the town. But if you've got 2 different brands, boy, we're seeing some synergies here. Are we not, Eric?
Yeah, we speculated a little bit about things like this prior to the merger, but this is one of the situations that create kind of a formula where 1 + 1 = 3. You've got the UFC over here, you've got WWE over here, both of them very, very powerful. And if you add them together, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 3. The magnitude of that merger becomes obvious in situations like this, because as you said, you're able, number one, probably to negotiate a better rental,
Yeah.
better,
A better
price,
rate, more favorable
building.
terms.
And I think as importantly is dates. You're probably going to have a little bit of an advantage in terms of opportune dates, because not every date that's available 52 weekends a year is necessarily the best weekend of stage events, and not having to compete against, rock and roll or anything else that's competing against you in the marketplace for that venue, um, definitely gives you leverage when you got 2 powerful brands to bring to the negotiating table in hopes of getting preferable dates throughout whatever the term of the agreement is.
Well, let's talk about 2 big brands, because Stone Cold Steve Austin came up recently. He was speaking to ESPN to help promote the new video game, WWE 2K24. And he was asked if he was to ever consider to return to the ring again, who would the dream opponent be? And Austin, of course, passed on that idea, but later on said, I like Punk, and I think Punk likes me. So as long as he can take a stunner, I consider him a great friend, a great guy, and a great wrestler who's had a great career. We'll see. Now, of course, we know Punk is not going to be able to wrestle this WrestleMania, but a lot of people, when they saw Stone Cold return to wrestle Kevin Owens before, they thought, hey man, we might actually get another dream match out of Austin. And when people saw that Punk was coming back, people started chattering about what if that happened? The dream match that never was. They promoted it and teased it with a video game more than a decade ago. People are still interested in it. And old Steve couldn't help but maybe poke the bear a little bit in this interview. Would you be surprised to see Steve Austin wrestle again? And do you think it's possible we see it at next year's WrestleMania or one of these other international PLEs before then?
I would be surprised. Um, I'd be happy to see it. I'd be excited to see it, but I would definitely be surprised. Next year's WrestleMania, man, that's a long way off. Kind of hard to predict, but it all comes down to how Steve's feeling. You know, I was probably in Steve's last quote unquote match. Really wasn't much of a match, but in terms of being promoted with a story behind it and an arc leading to a pay-per-view and all that. When I wrestled Steve in Montreal, I didn't even want to say wrestled. When I was in the ring with Steve at Montreal, and at that point in time, when I don't remember when that was 2005, maybe four. That's almost 20 years ago, and there was no way in the world I could have ever imagined at that point in time that Steve would ever step into the ring in an actual match with an actual opponent. He just physically, it wasn't in the cards. Now, has Steve recovered? Is he rehabbed? Has he overcome the issues that he had whenever I worked with him at No Way Out in Montreal? If he hasn't, I can see it because he looks like he's in great shape. He's smart as hell. He knows his body. He knows what he can do and what he can't do. I'd love to see it, but I would be surprised.
I would be surprised too, but I hope it happens. And I'm not saying this is it, but can you imagine if they could put that together next year? If it was Rock and Roman at WrestleMania and Austin and Punk, I mean, those would be monster dream matches for main event, seemingly night one and night two.
And, you know, we're talking about Steve and his injuries. Let's be honest and talk about Punk.
Yeah.
Punk is been very susceptible to serious injuries over his last couple outings.
Yeah.
So it's not only Steve that's got to, you know, would have to work hard at being physically ready and able to bump around and do the things that Steve would want to do, I would imagine. You know, when you're a guy like Steve Austin, you don't want to come out there and be half of what the audience remembers.
Right.
That's always the danger, right? When guys who are so successful for so long get out of the business and and decide to make a comeback, and it's just less than what people remember. Part of that is because people remember you and their memory of you and their memory of that time gets kind of hyperinflated over time.
Absolutely.
You know, you remember it much differently and more favorably in some respects than it really was at the time. And then on top of that, you've got age and you've got time, and the fact that, you know, in this case, Steve Austin hasn't been in the ring in an actual match in 20 years. You know, it's hard to go out there and meet the audience's expectation when that expectation is kind of based on memory that wasn't actually true, at least to the magnitude that you recall it. So it's hard to live up to the audience's expectations for talent like that. And especially someone like Steve Austin, who's very proud. But he's got his head on straight, doesn't have an overinflated view of himself or value. But at the same time, he won't want to disappoint the audience. He won't want to go out there knowing he's not going to be able to deliver on an expectation. So you've got that, and you've got the same situation with CM Punk. CM Punk has got to be able to put together a 3 or 4 or 5, 6 month run without injuries to really start feeling his momentum. And it's good. How old is Punk? Is like 44, 45, somewhere in that area, 41. He's not going to heal up real fast. His rehab is going to be tough. And then you've got to get back in the ring and get in ring shape again. It's going to be interesting to see how Punk comes out of this with the series of injuries that he's sustained over the last year or so. Yeah.
45 years old is the number we'll put on Mr. Punk. And I guess now we should talk about AEW. You and I had a bit of a discourse last week about the Sting angle. I am a super Sting fan and so excited to see the way they've tried to give him a proper send off with the last match. and it feels like they're going to set all kinds of records for themselves in Greensboro. As we're recording, I think they're just shy of 16,000. Only a handful of tickets remain. They continue to open up some production kills, so I'm sure it'll expand more and more. I've even heard rumors they might be trying to rent a theater next door just to show it on closed circuit. That sounds old school, and it is not the type of conversation we've heard about AEW in a while. But our Henson close shave of the week this week is the promo that Darby Allin cut on the Young Bucks this week. Now, we did a poll over on our YouTube, which you can find at 83weeks.com or 83weeks on youtube.com. They both take you to our YouTube, but we ran a poll there. We had 5,200 votes who said that they thought you would hate this Darby Allin promo. I'm sure you saw the promo. He is not talking about the attack on Sting or the attack on Sting's sons. He was talking about his personal issue with the Young Bucks. And he sort of blurred the lines a little bit and talked about how they passed him up, but there was one EVP here who had brains. And I'm not talking about Kenny Omega. That was indeed a Cody Rhodes reference. And then he talked about how these guys would instead hire their friends like Brandon Cutler. They even called it All Friends Wrestling, which I believe is something that Jim Cornette coined originally over on his podcast. So he's leaning into a quote unquote worked shoot brother, internet wrestling community centric promo. So the listeners of this show over on YouTube felt pretty strongly, 70%, that you would hate this promo. What did you think of Darby's promo?
I think it was typical AEW. It's indie-rific. I think, and, if you look at that promo in terms of the structure and delivery of the promo, it was great. Passionate. It was coherent. It had a strong central message and theme. Unfortunately, the strong central message and theme was indie-rific as hell, typical AEW, appealing to the Dave Meltzer audiences of the world. It's just stupid. You could, first of all, those who voted, and 70% of those who thought I would hate it were absolutely, I don't hate it. I don't actually give two shits one way or the other. I've got no dog in the AEW hunt. I do not take them seriously as a legitimate competitor or legitimate growth opportunity for in the wrestling business. It is what it is. It's Tony Khan with his own little wrestling fantasy camp, and he's having fun with it, and good for him and good for the people that are making money. But it was nonsensical. The entire story with Sting is not good for Sting. I'm proud of Sting. I'm a huge Steve Borden fan and obviously a Sting fan character, but you could drive trucks through the holes in the way this story has been presented. And if it weren't for the fact that Sting has been around as long as he have, he's such a beloved character. He's achieved so much. He's delivered so much to so many people for such a long period of time that they would have sold out 16 or 17,000 tickets regardless of who Sting's opponent or the story was going to be. It has nothing to do with the Bucks and their popularity or their story or their promos or anything else they're doing. In fact, the fact that they were able to sell the 16 or 17,000 tickets, given the story that we're watching, is a true testimony to Sting and has nothing to do with the brain trust or lack thereof at AEW. I mean, if you just look at that story, the fact that, excuse me, presumably the Young Bucks turned heel based on the internet reaction to their involvement in the CM Punk backstage debacle. And because the audience blamed the Young Bucks, they then went, okay, hell with it. We're going to be heels, whatever. I guess that was the inciting moment that changed their characters, and they became heels and inserted themselves, or were inserted. I'm not suggesting they did it, but they then became inserted in the Sting story. And oh, by the way, Sting, we bring in Ric Flair because we're going to bank on this nostalgia, which I think was a great idea. And I loved it. I was looking forward to it. And Sting is going to be a part of this story, which creates opportunity. Is Sting going to turn on, or excuse me, is Rick going to turn on Sting? I would have hated it, but at least it's there. It's something to anticipate, to discuss, to talk about, much like we're talking about with Rock. Is he really a heel or is he there to help Cody? That kind of intrigue and that nuance in the story is what helps create anticipation. So I was excited that they brought Rick into the story because that nostalgia and that legacy can only enhance the outcome eventually when you get to it. And a week before, we see Sting show up, and he's in a tag with Darby or whatever he was doing, and he gets his ass handed to him and his kids, beat up with baseball bats and bloody. And there was not even a reference to Ric Flair, why he wasn't there. Not even a reference. It's like it fucking never happened. Whatever. But that's a hole. And now Darby's out there cutting a promo that has nothing to do with what we saw the week before. And we're gonna call back to the internet wrestling community story that's floating around, and we're gonna build a story based on that. It is childish. The booking in AEW is just atrocious. I hated it. It's not whatever. It is what it is. I don't care. I just can't take any of it seriously. I can't.
I, for one, did think we were going to see at least some comments. Maybe we'll see. I assume we'll hear from Sting this week. We know we will next week because they got a double taping in Huntsville, but it's going to be interesting, to say the least. How we
what do you
try
think?
to.
You're always putting me on the spot. I know you're friends with Tony and you have a different way of communicating than I do. I vomit my emotions when it comes to stuff like this, but I mean, am I being too hard on them?
I think you're being a little hard on the Bucks. I mean, the rumor and innuendo is we heard that Sting picked his opponents, and obviously Sting's going to be a babyface when you're promoting a show around it being Sting's last match. So you need someone to play the heel. So they'll cheer Sting. I get that. So the Bucks were asked to do this, and I think they're doing it to the best of their ability. We actually got a good little comment from, at Yellow Shoe Guy over on YouTube. He brought the noise here. They should change their name to the Bucks, not a knock on their age, but for character development. I thought, listen, if you're really trying to position yourself as we're the authority and we're the money and we're only here for the money and we created all these jobs, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it is time to drop the young off and just go with, hey, we're the Bucks and we're heels now. Cause they're calling themselves Matthew and Nicholas and, they're trying, but it is going to be tough to get them to be taken seriously if they do this brutal beatdown and then it's not discussed the next week. Now, I, for one, thought you might like a little bit of a insider comment, little shoot comment, blurring the lines, but I felt like we have time for that later. At first, I felt like we needed to establish that, hey, Darby's here to defend Sting's honor. But I do like the idea of, hey, respectfully, in just a few weeks, Sting's gone. Darby might continue this feud with the Young Bucks. I get we need some backstory. I just don't know if we needed it there. And maybe they're saving it for something that Sting is going to do next week on with a promo with his sons or something. I don't know. But it just didn't feel connected. Every now and again you have, what are those things y'all do in movies and television? You have like a continuity person. And it feels like in this particular moment, we needed somebody to be like, hey, Darby, don't forget to remember to mention the blood that's all over their suits right now. Like that was just sort of glossed over.
In television, that position is called a story editor. And a story editor, whether it's a movie or television, a story editor is to make sure that if there is an arc, and by the way, I don't think there is one in AEW. I think these are random ideas that develop in Tony's head and end up on television without a lot of conversation, or at least the conversation that should be taking place. But a story editor would look at, okay, here's my 12-week story or 5-week story, whatever it is. Here's the premise. Here is the arc. This is what I want to happen. And the story editor's job would be to make sure that the narrative, whether it be in the form of an in-ring promo like we saw out of Darby, or the action in the ring and the outcomes of conflict and resolution throughout the arc, the story editor is there to make sure that the story stays on track and you're checking the boxes along the way in the arc, the critical points in a storyline that need to happen in order to hope to build anticipation, create more interest, whatever it is, in the story. There is no story. First of all, there's no story to begin with. There is an excuse for having the Bucks in the match. That's exactly what this is. I've said so many times, whether it's on this show or Strictly Business or in interviews that I've done with others, is story requires discipline. Discipline meaning if you look at any basic fundamental story, television, movies, books, doesn't fucking matter. There are points along the way in that story that you really have to make sure you address. Check that box at that point of that story in order to have any hope of a story building, so that at the end of the story, when you finally get your resolution and your outcome, the audience reacts the way you want them to. There is no discipline. There is no story editor. There's no even fundamental comprehension of continuity in story or in character. It's just random, emotional fantasy internet booking. It's inderific as hell. That's all it is. It is not episodic in any way, shape, or form. So I think to expect that there would be any kind of continuity based on everything that we've seen out of AEW up until this point is really wishful thinking and kind of naive. Do I think they're holding back some plot point or some big moment? I hope they are, but nothing they've done up until this moment that we're recording this podcast suggests to me that that's the way they think or that's the way they operate. It just isn't. This is just random stuff thrown up against the wall, used as what they call a story is nothing more than an excuse for what Tony wants to do next week. It's sad. It's sad because AEW is has missed, and is continuing to miss such a great opportunity. And they may or may not have another opportunity like this down the road. Perhaps they will. Perhaps they'll get renewed. I hope they do. And they'll have time to figure this stuff out. But as of right this minute, there's no story. There's no build. There's just random stuff being thrown up against the wall. And just, like I said, it doesn't work for me. There's people out there that enjoy it. Huge AEW fans and are drinking the AEW Kool-Aid, and they're going to be loyal AEW fans no matter what happens. Happy for them. For me, my perspective, I absolutely can't take them seriously. I don't want to say a joke, but it's just hard for me to take them seriously.
Let's take just a minute to give a shout out to everybody over on AFS. They have joined us here as a part of our live studio audience. So I want to show a little love to Coach Rossi and Lucas Kinzer and Greg Jacobson and Joe Morris. And so many of you guys are hanging out. Shout out to Chris and Greg. See all you guys hanging out with us. So, there's Coach Keith. Got the folks are piling in here. Thank you for joining to be a part of our live studio audience today. Denovius Mac has a question for you. He's part of our live studio audience. He wants to know, can you see Anthem and TKO merging together, and perhaps we can finally see a WWE/TNA card? As a reminder, Anthem is who owns TNA or Impact, whatever you want to call it. And there's been a lot of upheaval there. There were some things that were discussed and maybe debunked even, where earlier this week, Dave Meltzer reported that Tommy Dreamer was head of creative. And then Mike Johnson contacted Tommy Dreamer, who said, no, I'm not. So a lot of questions.
Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? Dave Meltzer got it wrong. That's a huge shock.
Did get that one wrong. Chat me up. What do you think about this idea that maybe there's a merger? I don't see that happen.
No, I don't see it either. I don't think there's enough demand for a WWE TNA experience. I don't see it. I don't know what's going to happen with Anthem. I have no idea what their goals are. There's not enough information to have an opinion, to be honest. But one opinion I do have is I don't think there's going to be any significant interest in TNA brand by anybody in WWE, other than, a one-off appearance like we saw at Royal Rumble. Things like that are kind of fun, but you don't need to do any kind of a merger to accomplish that.
I would agree with that. I also agree with what Mike Hoop said as part of our live studio audience. He says, Darby was the best he has ever been this past week. I thought it felt real. And I agree. The promo did feel real, and it did feel like it blurred the lines. Them referencing CODY is not something we were supposed to hear and all those sort of things. Like, I get all that. But I don't think necessarily it advanced the Sting storyline. Did it advance the Darby Buck storyline? Absolutely. We know they're going to hook it up in a couple of weeks, and they've got, 4 TVs to pull it together and have a big finish. And it does feel like more often than not, Tony has a really strong go home episode of TV. So I'm excited they're going to be here in Huntsville. And I hope some of our guys from ad free shows are going to be in the house and will come say hello. Speaking of ad free shows, if you're listening to this as it drops on Monday, later tonight, Eric will be live on adfreeshows.com. We're doing a little fun Monday Night Raw watch along party. And as we know, Raw sometimes presents their first hour commercial free. Well, our first hour tonight will be with Eazy-E. All ad free shows members are invited. Sign up right now at adfreeshows.com and come hang out with Eric later tonight. A little watch along, not commercial free, but with Eazy-E on adfreeshows.com. So listen, let's jump into it, man. We're finally here at our topic, SuperBrawl IX. We're going to table the current stuff for the rest of the show. Maybe we'll draw some correlations or see some things that stick out. But this show went down 25 years ago in Oakland, California. And this is a hugely successful pay-per-view. We're February of 99. In fact, it is the third most successful pay-per-view show in WCW history. 485,000 buys. So of course, Bash at the Beach, Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman would be number 2. And we know what number 1 is, Starrcade 97. Would you have guessed that SuperBrawl 99 was number 3 on the list, Eric?
No, especially given where we were towards the latter half of 98 and certainly at this point in 99. This is following, what everybody considered the beginning of the end with Sting and Hogan, the finish at Starrcade. And then it was the finger poke of doom that was going to cause WC. It was the beginning of the end for WC. So there's all these in the narrative, in the internet wrestling community. There was all these things that were definitely the death nails of WCW, but yet we did almost 500,000 buys in pay-per-view. It's an interesting stat, really, because in reality, our creative was suffering, clearly suffering. Our ratings had deteriorated. We were still probably delivering. I don't know what the television ratings were at the time. I don't know if you have them in front of you in the research, but I'm going to guess, even though the wheels were falling off and there was a lot of things wrong with creative at that time, we were probably still delivering 3.5 million viewers a week, even in our weakened state. So there was still an audience there, but without question, we had lost so much momentum that stat, as I sit here today, really surprises me.
It's interesting too, because, this is the last sort of high watermark for the organization, probably. I mean, the month before it sold out, which we did in the archives over at 83weeks.com, that did 330,000 buys. And even the year prior, SuperBrawl VIII, that was a rematch from Starrcade 97. We were finally going to get clarity at the Cow Palace. Is it Sting or is it Hollywood Hogan's belt? It's a rematch. And even that show did 70,000 fewer buys than this show. You've got a lot of momentum here in early 99. People are really interested in this particular pay-per-view. And before we talk about the 70,000 and just year over year where we are, month to month, for you to see Sold Out doing 330 and then this show doing 485, do you think that was more based on Super Brawl had been established as being a big pay-per-view and maybe people tried Sold Out and said, I think I'm good on that. Now I know the first version of Sold Out was way different than the ones that followed it, but do you think that name, maybe you had burnt some consumer confidence with that brand Sold Out?
Look, pay-per-views each have their own personalities. It takes time, in my opinion, or at least it did back then. Things are different, obviously, today. But not every pay-per-view is positioned to outperform the one before it. If you can outperform year over year on a particular pay-per-view, let's take Sold Out. I think Sold Out happened in what, March?
Yeah, Sold Out's always a January pay-per-view.
Okay, Sold
Out's January, Super Brawl's February, March is uncensored.
Okay, so January, not as bad as March, because March, obviously, everybody's focus is on WrestleMania that time of year. It's hard to stand out in March. January was typically not a strong pay-per-view month for us. You know, our strong pay-per-view months were July, Bash at the Beach, Halloween Havoc, Starrcade. Typically because of the time of the year and competition on pay-per-view, January, February, March were tougher, particularly March. So I think, you know, I'd have to go back and look at Sold Out year over year to determine whether or not the brand had kind of wore itself out or whether we didn't do a great job marketing the brand or building it. I'd like to look at the year over year, but in terms of that time of year, I think it did pretty well. In terms of this pay-per-view, Super Bowl, which we're talking about, did exceedingly well given the time. But just for reference, and it's harder with WWE because they're PLEs, they're not part of a pay-per-view track that we can follow. But for AEW, what's been the most successful pay-per-view they've done this year? If you have it off the top of your head, I don't expect you have that information sitting in front of you. Are they in 100,000, 150, 200,000 range?
We're hearing that they do between 100 and 150 pretty routinely.
So this is WCW on its final legs when we've lost momentum. Our ratings were down. Competition was pretty much kicking our ass. And we're delivering close to a 500,000 pay-per-view buys compared to AEW, which is bragging about 150,000 buys. So it kind of puts into context, whereas as weak as WCW was at this point, in context, still doing pretty well compared to what we see today. You hate that I worked that in there, don't you?
Because it's not even, it's not a comparison. You know, you always say, whenever you're talking about AEW, you always say, stop talking about you're competing. You're not. You weren't head to head with them. You know, that's not what it is. You were head to head with their developmental show. What? Right. You're not competing.
I'm putting this in context. So much of the communication that I see in social media does compare where AEW is versus where WCW was. So my effort here, or the picture that I'm painting in creating context, is acknowledging that I had done a shitty job with creative. Creative was in the tank. The wheels were falling off. We've talked about it ad nauseum. But as weak as WCW was, at least with regard to this pay-per-view, doing exceedingly well at that time against real competition. And I was just trying to put the fact that despite the weakened state we were in, creatively, strategically, every other way, still doing quite a bit better.
Well, all right, listen,
current AEW product is today. That's all.
I'm for it.
Just putting it into context.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad you did it, because I just want to remind you that AEW is just fucking destroyed WWE in pay-per-view sales. I mean, it's not even close.
Say what?
AEW's destroyed WWE in pay-per-view sales. It's not even close.
Because WWE has premium live events and they stream them and they're not in the pay-per-view business. What
now, careful using that logic around here, Eric. There is no pay-per-view business for wrestling anymore, Eric. It's all gone. It's all vanished. So we're talking about apples and pomegranates. WWE.
Wait a minute. So AEW doesn't have pay-per-views?
They do, but I'm saying, who else does? I'm waiting, Eric. Who else has them? Who else, Eric? Who else has pay-per-view wrestling? Nobody.
But what does that have to do with contextualizing where AEW is today versus where WCW was when the wheels were falling off?
Because everybody was doing pay-per-view back then. You had conditioned the consumer that that's what they were paying for. That doesn't even exist now. There's no debate that more people watched wrestling back then and more people bought the pay-per-views back then. But that's true for everything. More people watched back then than they do now. More people.
Do you think that's true? And I'm not being argumentative here, but
absolutely it's true. Now, here's the difference. We're hearing global numbers now when we take a look at things like streaming. Take a look at this weekend with Peacock. No, it's not on pay-per-view. But think about how many people around the world are going to watch that didn't have the opportunity to do that back then. So yes, the ease of access globally is there, but way more people watched wrestling domestically here in the United States back then than they do now. I totally believe it.
I wouldn't argue that, but I'm more curious, and this kind of goes to the way people consume, because people do consume differently.
Yes.
But in terms of the impressions, total viewers, if you look at television, which clearly has diminished, the audience for television across the board has deteriorated quite a bit over the years. But if you look at television, you look at streaming, you look at YouTube, which I guess is streaming as well. You look at the different ways that people have access to the product. If you, in aggregate, and I don't even know how you track it, but if you could track it, do we think there are actually less people watching it today than 20 years ago, 15 years ago? Or are they just spread out in ways that we can't quite count? I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, certainly I know people can, I have friends who keep up with wrestling through social media. I have other friends who keep up with wrestling through the WWE's YouTube channel. Like, they're not really hardcore wrestling fans, but they keep up with it enough. And they do it through one of those mediums. Never do they ever sit down and turn on DirecTV or.
You know what, Conrad? I'm probably closer to that than I am closer to, it's Monday, let's sit down and watch Raw, or it's Wednesday, let's sit down and watch Dynamite. I do not make an appointment to watch any wrestling at all, unless I know something that you and I are going to cover the next day or the following week. Or if I hear something on social media that makes me think, that's going to be pretty interesting. I want to see how they develop this. Then I'll tune in. But otherwise, I DVR shit. So I'll go back. If I need to watch something, I will. But sit down and watch it like we used to? Absolutely.
I just think it's interesting to take a look at what was happening in WCW back then and try to put your finger on why did people tune in such a big way for this particular show. And then they never did again. I mean, they never hit this high water mark again throughout the rest of 99 or 2000. We're going to talk about, the way things used to be a little bit here today, and then try to compare it to today. And when I think about that sort of comparison, I think about a product like Henson, because it has an old school feel, but it's got new age tech. This is an absolute home run. I'm a big believer in this. I have one here at my house. I got one down at my vacation spot. I travel with one. Everybody in my office, they hear me talk about it over and over. Even the lady who cuts my hair, she is even a Henson user now. I think you got to meet Henson Shaving. What a cool story they have. A family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that's made parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover. But now they're bringing that precision engineering to your doggone razor. Here's what they're doing. They said, hey, let's fire up those aerospace grade CNC machines and let's make the thinnest razors ever. How thin? About 0.0013 inches. That's thinner than a human hair. And what that means for you is a more secure and stable blade that gives you a vibration-free shave, which means fewer nicks, cuts, scrapes. Not only that, the Henson razor actually has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, and that's going to make clogging virtually impossible. Henson Shaving wanted to create the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old school shave with the benefits of new school tech. And once you own a razor, check this out. It's only $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. So let's say no to subscriptions. Let's say yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/Bischoff to pick the razor for you and use the code Bischoff, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades all free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head right now to hensonshaving.com/Bischoff. Be sure to use our promo code Bischoff. So Eric, we got to talk about your boy, Terry Taylor. He's going to quit WCW before Nitro on January 18th, and he's going to take a job working for Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara in scripting the television shows for the World Wrestling Federation. He was at his job the very next day, the 19th. And I guess he was working here with you without a contract. And maybe that's how it was all made possible. It's written here that Taylor was one of those unfortunate types caught in the middle, having to make sense out of all the egos, vetoing everything, and then taking the heat because the shows didn't make any sense. And he had at time been Bischoff's whipping boy. This is the report. Well, want to guess? I mean, Terry Taylor was clearly on the phone with Dave Meltzer all the time, to the point where Meltzer even said this. Apparently the departure of Terry Taylor went something like this. Bischoff jumped Taylor about rumors he was going to the WWF and told him if he wasn't happy in WCW to just leave. Taylor talked about being under the pressure with his father having health problems, and Bischoff offered him time off without pay. The next day, he made the deal with McMahon. Gee, I wonder how Dave got all those specific details. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, Eric? Talk to me about this with Taylor. What happened?
I had such a strange relationship with Terry Taylor because I liked him personally.
I hear the but.
Well, it was a complicated relationship.
Okay.
I did enjoy being around Terry, even professionally, because Terry Taylor had a great feel for producing matches. Terry was great at that. Terry understood psychology really well. So I enjoyed and respected his abilities in that regard. But Terry brought with him certain characteristics, personality traits that I didn't appreciate. Terry didn't always conduct himself professionally. WCW. These relationships within the industry sometimes created a conflict of interest and opened WCW up to potential litigation. Without going into specifics.
I was fixed to say, you got your tap shoes on today, boy.
Well, out of respect. Terry and I have subsequently had a conversation, and It is what it was, but it was a problem. Did I know that Terry was in communication, or did I believe, I should say, that Terry was in communication with Meltzer? Had I known for a fact, had I caught him red-handed, I would have absolutely let him go on the spot in a very public and uncomfortable way. Because to me, that's just such a sign of disrespect and disloyalty and all the things that I just detest in a human being. I couldn't prove it, but I knew it, as did a lot of other people. And it had just gotten to the point with Terry at this time that I didn't really care whether he stayed or not. I didn't. I mean, had he stayed, did Terry provide some asset value because of some of the perspectives that he brought into it, to a creative conversation? Yes. Was it worth some of the other issues and challenges that Terry brought to the table as well? Absolutely not. And I did not care one way or the other whether Terry stayed or left. In reality, I should have cut him loose a long time for this, because I just didn't have that feeling, that sense of confidence that he was loyal to WCW, that he wouldn't be out using useful idiots the same way so many people have used. And we're seeing it now, by the way. This just isn't me taking an opportunity to random shot at Dave Meltzer. But if you look at what's happening now with Dave Meltzer and how the internet now, social media, is just calling him out on his bullshit, it is a beautiful thing for me to see, because for so long, Dave Meltzer would have the opportunity to have a relationship with someone like Terry Taylor, who during that period of time, Terry Taylor would use Dave Meltzer to plant the narrative that Terry Taylor would want in order to help Terry Taylor, in Terry's mind, achieve whatever it is Terry was trying to achieve. He used Dave Meltzer by feeding Meltzer information that was either bullshit, a complete lie, or distorted so much that it might as well be. But it seemed useful to Terry Taylor to have that relationship with Meltzer, much like other people still do today. Do I think that Dave Meltzer has some contacts within WWE or obviously in AEW? Absolutely, I do. What I do believe, though, is those people are using Meltzer because they know he's so easy to use to manipulate the internet wrestling audience. Terry Taylor did it back then, and I was happy to see him leave, actually, in many respects. And I think it's still happening to this day. Do I think that Tony Khan and Dave Meltzer have conversations?
Of course
I absolutely do.
Yeah, they acknowledge.
Do I think there are people in WWE that do? There are some that are suggesting that he has a conversation with Rock. I don't know whether he does or not.
Come on.
I do. What I do know is whatever relationships he had are helping to make Dave Meltzer look like a complete idiot.
I do. Meltzer did not have the best week this past week. But come on, man. I mean, listen, in your opinion, back in the day, talking to Meltzer was a fireable offense.
Had I been able to prove it, not just talking to him, but sharing information, proprietary information, you're fucking right, I would.
You think Ari Emanuel's going to fire Rock when he finds out that Rock's been on the horn with Dave Meltzer?
Not if Rock's using Dave Meltzer like the useful idiot that he is. That's just an asset.
I just think
now you're using somebody to manipulate the wrestling audience and create chatter and buzz. That I do believe is happening. I think Dave is a tool.
Well, I'm not going to call him a tool. I understand the way you used it, what you mean there, but boy, it has never been more apparent to me. And it just sort of, when I read the things I read, it just sort of makes me. I mean, I turned to Megan about a week ago and said, "Can you believe The Rock talks to Dave Meltzer?" Because, she's not plugged into wrestling, but she knows who those two folks are. And she's like, "What?" But it happens. And anybody who denies that doesn't really read what's going on.
But the important thing is, if they do talk, and I suggest they may, I don't know, neither do you, but
come on,
we certainly feel like it, right?
Come on. Yeah.
Meltzer's being used. He is a tool not like a tool like an asshole, but he's a tool like a fucking wrench. He's just a tool to manipulate the audience. The part that's funny to me is that Dave thinks that these people actually respect him and counsel with him for advice or direction or casual conversation. That doesn't happen. But do people pick up the phone and manipulate him for their own purposes, much like Terry Taylor did, much like many other people did? Abso-fucking-lutely. And, hats off to Dave. He's been able to figure out a way to make a living by being used as a tool, putting it out there and getting people to pay for it. But that's the beauty right now of what we're seeing on social media is people are starting to call him out on his bullshit. And he freaks the fuck out. He probably has his list of people that he's blocked probably exceeds the following that he has. Because the minute you criticize him, he blocks you.
Can you imagine?
And it's become a badge of honor on social media. People start bragging about getting blocked by Dave Meltzer. Awesome.
It's interesting to me that, because we've seen a lot of criticism when like AEW or WWE does a press conference and they get softball questions. Can you imagine in private when one of these folks gets a call from The Rock? It's really Dwayne Johnson. They have it programmed in their phone as The Rock, and oh my God, a movie star. Heck of a way to channel some information. Heck of a way. The build to Super Brawl begins in Columbus with Ric Flair going crazy, saying he's going to wrestle Hogan at Super Brawl for the title. And he puts his hair up for a match with you. And we've seen a lot over the years where people would say, hey, we're not sure what'll get a rating. Just let Flair wrestle Sting. It always gets a rating. Yeah. But it feels like in this era, hey, we're not sure what to do. Let's get back with Flair and Hogan. It's the match that put us on the map on pay-per-view. It'll do it again. And I'll be damned if it doesn't work here. Who do you think deserves the credit for going back to the well one more time with Hogan and Flair?
And what do you mean deserves the credit in what way?
Well, I'm saying sometimes people would say, oh, we've seen that match before. We're looking for new matches. I get that. But on the other hand, like it's been bankable since 1994. Here we are 5 years later. Why not do Flair and Hogan again?
I just think there's certain, it's kind of like Hall & Oates.
Yeah.
And they just fit together. It just works. Just did. And I don't think it's fair or accurate to give either one of them credit. I think Ric's ability to be passionate, because Ric he wears his passions on his sleeve in real life and in the ring. And because of Ric's intense passion, he can make you forget that you've seen that match before.
Yes.
As long as there's a different reason for it, a different issue on the table, Ric can make you forget everything else that's ever happened. So in that sense, I think as an opponent, particularly when it comes to the narrative it takes to drive interest in a match, how do you not tip your hat to Ric Flair? That's what he was best at, is creating passion and emotion. Hogan, because of their history, because he was Hulk Hogan, it was the chemistry was built in. The story was really there. You have to craft much, just build off the history to a large degree. And who's the best in the business, who's the best that ever was. Hogan could lay claim, and arguably so could Ric Flair. So you've got two of the very best in the world at that time. And not only the best in the world at that time, when I say best, maybe not physically in the ring and being able to go out there and perform athletically at a super high level and do all kinds of crazy shit. But in terms of the story, telling the ring, history, the drama that came along with it, just as a result of being Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, I think it's like I said, it's a Hall & Oates thing. It was just magic. Hard to pin it on any one person.
Let's talk about Jericho. Meltzer would say the Jericho situation remains the same. There's personal heat because backstage, Jericho's or Bischoff is claiming Jericho virtually agreed to a deal a ways back, but now he won't sign it. Meanwhile, the
That's
WWF has made Jericho their number one priority as far as acquiring any new piece of talent. He was in Buffalo, but was told he wouldn't be used at Nitro, and there are rumors that he's going to receive a $750,000 offer. But to the best of my knowledge, he actually hasn't received the offer. It doesn't appear likely the WWF will match that offer or can even come close. But the WWF also has some obvious advantages when it comes to someone in his position. So let's talk about this. Did you feel like you had a verbal with Chris, or were you trying to find things to entice him, or was the bloom completely off the rose here?
none of the above. I was trying, well, maybe you covered it. I was trying hard to keep Chris. I didn't want Chris to leave. Dave's reporting, once again, was completely false, or he was fed that information, perhaps by Chris. I don't know. I did make an offer, pretty substantial offer to Chris. I believe it was closer to 500. I don't, it may have been 750. You know, it's 25 years ago. So fuck, I don't know. But I don't think it was quite that high, but I was trying, you know, and I didn't have the same budget I had previously.
Right.
At this time, things had
Changing.
been, they started changing in the fourth quarter of 98. And by first quarter of 99, it was just ass ugly in terms of what happened to my budget. So but I did the best I could do, but I didn't. And this is the part that I take exception with, because again, it was a lie and misrepresentation. I didn't think that I had a verbal. First of all, I don't consider a verbal agreement worth having a conversation about. Verbal agreements don't mean a thing. I was trying hard to keep Chris. I didn't think that we had a meeting of the minds in any way, shape, or form, orally or otherwise. I was trying to get to that because I didn't want Chris to leave. But there was no heat between Chris and I. Zero, I mean, there may have been frustration on Chris's part, really. Not on mine. My frustration is I really want to keep this guy, and I'm working my ass off to do it, and it doesn't seem to be working. But there was no personal heat. I didn't blame Chris. I wasn't angry with Chris. I understood what Chris was attempting to do and why he was attempting to do it. But the idea that I thought we had a deal and there's heat because he told me he was going to, such, you know, childlike reporting on behalf of usefulity wasn't true.
You are going to be on your heels a little bit here. Raw at this point has extended their winning streak over Nitro for 13 consecutive weeks. And I'm wondering, did that make you feel a certain type of way? I mean, obviously, you've been to the top of the mountain, beat Vince once, beat him multiple times. There was a streak. But maybe you got comfortable after 83 consecutive weeks. And when you find yourself losing 13 consecutive weeks in a row, is it just another day at the office? Is it getting to you mentally? Do you feel that pressure professionally? Talk to me about that.
Overall, I was definitely feeling the pressure. Not so much in losing 13. You know, it wasn't like we were sitting on going, oh my God, they beat us again. Things were bad enough overall in all aspects of not just in terms of the television ratings, but WCW overall was in a very bad situation internally. And this was just like one more straw thrown on the camel's back, so to speak. It wasn't something that we all sat down at the next day when the ratings came on and went, oh my God, I can't believe this. What are we going to do? It wasn't that. This was just one more thing that had been happening for quite a while that added to the overall sense of frustration and stress in WCW. I take exception to the fact I never got comfortable. I mean, you didn't have time to get too comfortable. Did I get to a point at some time, say probably 97, perhaps early 98, where I was perhaps overconfident?
Yeah.
Yes, maybe, but
Wait a minute.
comfortable?
Hang on.
Comfortable? No.
You weren't comfortable getting floated down from the ceiling on a fucking Harley Davidson? Looked pretty comfortable to me wearing your crown.
Well, it was comfortable. And again, that was during a period of time when we were kind of on top of the world, but comfortable to me is complacency.
Okay.
And we weren't complacent.
Okay.
I wasn't complacent.
That's fair. I meant comfortable to be cocky, confident.
Yeah, I was confident and I was cocky, but that was part of my character. But behind the scenes, did I ever say, "Oh, fuck, we don't have to worry about this shit anymore. Ah, we're so good at this. Oh my gosh, yeah, call me on Tuesday. I'm going to take a couple days." No,
Well,
it was never that.
Maybe you didn't say that, but you were also telling people, "I'm going to drive a stake through his heart. I'm going to force him into bankruptcy. He's going out of business."
And I did say those things. That was my misguided way of kind of rally the team.
Sure.
I thought everybody would feel the same way I felt. I wanted to be number one.
Right.
That's the only thing that I gave a fuck about, was being number one. And not just in terms of television ratings, but there were other things that we weren't number one at. All that, the period of time where, we were beating them 83 weeks or 84 weeks, whatever it was in a row. We beat them a total over a couple of year period of about 104 weeks. So, I mean, we had stacked up a lot of wins on television, but they were still outperforming us in other areas, certainly internationally, certainly when it came to licensing and merchandising. We weren't even close. We weren't even a distant number two when it came to licensing and merchandising, even with the emergence of the NWO merchandise that we got hot. Even with the millions of dollars that we were selling over in Japan, we never came close to where WWE was, even while we were embarrassing them on TV every week. They still had a more robust business than we did in so many different areas. That was my goal, is to be number one, and not just on television. And I thought by being that over the top, super aggressive, that's who I am. If I decide I want to go after something, I tend to go for the throat. I don't start at somebody's feet and work my way up. I right for the throat. And that's the way I approached the business. And I thought mistakenly that others would kind of rally around that over the top way of saying, I want to be number one. And they actually didn't. It was not the, and not a highlight reel for my management experience. Sure.
The Nitro from Dallas would see you being sent to work at a concession stand. Of course, Ric Flair's running things here, having beat you at Starrcade, and Meltzer has interesting commentary about you working the concession stand. The similarities between Bischoff and McMahon were amazing, as now Bischoff is using a TV show watched by millions to be his psychiatric release, as he was complaining about internal audits and disappearing money. And Meltzer would point out that you were in the midst of an internal audit. Do you remember this audit? Was this a pain in your neck?
No, I mean, audits were something that happened fairly regularly. The frustration that I was feeling wasn't so much about internal audits. It was about having budgets that had been previously approved, completely torn up and reestablished by people who weren't involved in my business.
Yeah.
That was frustrating. But internal audits didn't bother me at all. I mean, finance didn't report to me. I never touched money. All I did is go out and make it or spend it. And I did so according to the parameters set forth to me by Turner Finance. As long as I stayed within my budgets, I was fine. And I was. Frustrating in the sense that, did it take time out of the day to have conversations with people that were really a waste of time? Yeah, that was frustrating. But other than that, I don't know what Meltzer's talking about.
Another Nitro in Minneapolis would see you doing more chores for Flair. Flair ordered Bischoff to stand in a dunk tank for the next 3 hours, while all the WCW people who hate him, and boy, was that a long line, got to throw softballs to knock him in. Luckily for Bischoff, nobody who hates him has much of an arm, and these segments were dying of embarrassment as guys kept missing the target pitch after pitch on live TV. Listen, I love the idea of putting you in a dunk tank, but maybe pre-taping this so we could have made sure we had some guys knocking you in. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe, but that's the fun part of live TV, right?
Yeah, for sure.
If you want everything to look, if you want it to look like something Disney on Ice would produce, then yeah, you pre-tape it. But if you believe, as I did and still do, that the beauty of live television and the reason there's so much support and interest in professional wrestling today as a live television product is because that sense that anything can happen is an important part of the reasons why people watch live wrestling. Otherwise, they'd be watching taped wrestling because it's less expensive and easier. And there's less risk that something's going to go wrong. But then it's too stale. The fact that it's live matters. And sometimes the fact that things don't go according to plan reinforces the fact that it's live. And I don't want to suggest that you hope shit like this happens, but at the same time, you don't panic over it either. If you embrace that television live is different than a pre-taped show, reasons that I've already talked about, then you go with it. And if something doesn't go exactly the way it should have gone, creatively, sure, it's a little bit of a frustration, but overall, it supports the fact that it's live. And that has more value than a perfectly executed pre-tape segment.
Let's talk about Sandman. He's going to make his debut here, and he's not going to be identified by the announcers. The announcers were told, according to Dave Meltzer, you can't call him Sandman. You can't call him Jim Fullington. You can't mention ECW or Raven. You can't even explain what the hell Sandman was talking about to 95% of the audience. But he comes out with a cane. It's wrapped in, or he's wrapped himself in barbed wire. He's not smoking a cigarette. Looks like he's dropped a few LBs. I guess this whole, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. We're fearing litigation from ECW, or is this a deal y'all cut, or what can you tell us about why?
Well, again, it's Dave Meltzer twisting, turning, inverting, and creating fiction. Were there issues regarding calling him Sandman? I think we had learned vis-a-vis the WWE trademark and copyright infringement federal lawsuit that we had to be judicious and careful about using previously used names, trademarks. Yeah. So was there an overall awareness that applied to everybody, not just Sandman? Of course there was. But again, I think this was built upon by Dave Meltzer to kind of create a narrative that wasn't necessarily true. Did we stay away from calling him Sandman? Yes. Did we fear litigation from ECW? Not really, because it was almost always cry wolf. That was a tactic that Paul Heyman used a lot, is to threaten lawsuits, because Paul was familiar with Turner as a talent. Paul knew, based on previous experience, that all you had to do was threaten Turner and they would settle. That was their MO. And quite literally, I was told that Turner Legal, if sued at that point in time by a former talent, and if that lawsuit was less than $100,000, it was likely just to be settled out of court, because anything less than $100,000, it was just the cost of being in business. And it was easier just to pay people off and make them go away than it was to stack up a bunch of ridiculous lawsuits in court and have attorneys spending time on it. Paul knew that. Paul knew the hesitance of Turner Legal to get involved in any kind of litigation, valid or not.
Paul got paid out before. Yeah.
He used it. But that's not the same as being afraid of it. Just aware. So we didn't use his name. That shouldn't be unusual. The smoking thing, that was an issue, because Turner had Ted personally had a big issue with smoking. I was notified not by Ted, but by my boss at the time, I think it was Harvey Schiller, to no more cigars. Coming out with a lit cigar. We come out with an unlit cigar as a prop, but to smoke in the ring a cigar or a cigarette, I got a flag on Paul White. I had Paul White come to the ring while smoking a cigarette. I was notified immediately that that's a no-fly zone, Turner Broadcasting, so we stopped doing it. But other than that, there were no unusual conditions or restrictions as regarded Sam.
What can you tell us about bringing him into WCW at all? I mean, we would see him as being the intelligent guy hanging out at Raven's Pool. Now we're transitioning to this. But somebody was watching ECW. You told us it wasn't you, but I know that you really enjoyed the real life Jim Fullington. Talk to us about how Sandman came to be a part of the WCW roster at all.
Likely Kevin Sullivan. Kevin had a much closer, was paying closer attention to ECW than I was. Could have been Terry Taylor before Terry left. I don't know. But if I had to guess, I would say it was probably Kevin Sullivan. Fine, I didn't hire everybody that was on a roster. Some I did. Clearly, I approved them. But for the most part, I've always been a macro manager, almost to a fault. I guess it's sometimes a flaw. Is you put the right people in charge, you give them the tools, you give them the authority, flexibility to make their decisions, and then you evaluate them over a period of time as to how great those decisions were or not. It's kind of my overall approach to management. I don't micromanage people at all. I never have. So Kevin was working within Kevin's budget and certainly more aware of Sandman than I was, felt that Sandman would be an asset to WCW. I likely agreed or signed off on it because of the hardcore aspect of what Kevin was trying to do and create. And certainly hardcore wrestling was becoming more interesting. And why not have more people that are known for that? So it just made sense. By the way, welcome, Sandman, to ad-free shows.
How about
Derek
that?
Sabato, what a great storyteller. And I just dig his voice. He's got one of those voices. You just want to sit around and listen to him tell stories. He's such a great storyteller, and he's got the voice for it. I think he's going to be a huge asset. Ad-free shows.
Enter Sandman. Episode 1 is live now over at adfreeshows.com. If you haven't already, be sure to check it out. I was told, hey man, this looks and feels like an old school shoot interview where he's pulling no punches. Yeah, that's the idea. He's here with a beer in hand and a cigarette too. Enter Sandman. Episode 1 available now over at adfreeshows.com. Let's do some more Meltzer reporting here. Goldberg was apparently offered a guest spot on ER. Yeah, the NBC show. But WCW nixed it because I guess the filming would have conflicted with a Monday Nitro. But there was apparently some hurt feelings about this because they don't book Goldberg on a lot of Mondays anyway. So why wouldn't they give him the time off and perhaps an opportunity to be seen by an even bigger crowd? You've told us before you had some frustrations with whenever you would book something with NBC and then it would get nixed. This is not that same thing, but do you remember there being a request for Goldberg on what was at the time the #1 show on television, ER?
Just slight memory of it, but I will say my track record, my history, everything I've ever done or said suggests that if there's an opportunity to cross promote WCW talent, I am going to bend over backwards to make that happen.
Yes.
There's never been a situation in my entire career. In fact, you could probably go the other direction and say sometimes I worked too hard to achieve that, and it didn't really pay off in certain situations. But I can assure you that if there was an opportunity to book a WCW talent on an NBC show and it didn't conflict, I would have bent over backwards to make that happen. So Dave's reporting is probably flawed, likely flawed based on his history, and minimized the conflict that probably existed. If indeed I prevented it and didn't sign off on it, there had to be a very, very good reason. And my track record proves that.
Let's talk about a report from mid February. The entire WCW Latino project and Telemundo deal is off. The public response is that Sharon Sadello cut a bad financial deal for WCW with Telemundo. And the belief is that after the first Festival de Lucha taping in Waco, Texas on January 27th, which was disorganized because nobody knew which wrestlers would make it across the border, and almost nobody in WCW was aware Paco Alonso had switched affiliations with the WWF and thus was not going to send any of his wrestlers, that members of the production crew, like David Crockett and Keith Mitchell, really badmouthed the show to Eric Bischoff. Bischoff, just a few weeks earlier, had told everyone that getting the show off the ground was a major priority, and the company probably spent in excess of 300 grand looking and creating a hot new set and a new open before they wound up throwing the towel in after just one show. Talk to us about this Telemundo Festival de Lucha. What do you remember about Sharon Sadello? Perhaps the deal she cut, these expenses, and why it died so quickly.
We'll start with why it died so quickly. And a lot of it is just communication and cultural differences in the way we approach business. It was always stressful anytime we did business with talent from Mexico because inherently communication was an issue. Conan, who was almost always at the kind of center of a lot of those discussions and opportunities, was conflicted a lot of times. You know, his relationships with talent, his relationships with WCW, his obligations to WCW, there were at times conflicts. Because Conan and I are pretty tight now, and we're going to leave it at that. But it just got to be a situation where it was just untenable. There was no fixing it. Even the relationships within Mexico were often very difficult to track and predict and have any confidence in terms of long-term planning. So it was a great idea. The idea being that we wanted to really expand WCW into the Hispanic market, and we were continually looking for ways to do that. Sharon Sadello it was an international TV deal, so she may have had a hand in doing that deal, but WCW International Television was typically handled by another division of Turner Broadcasting. We didn't really have a lot of day-to-day influence over some of those decisions. This may have been one that came to us more likely through Conan initially because of his deep relationships there. Sharon Sadello, because it did fall under international, may have gotten involved in it, but she wouldn't have cut any deals that I wouldn't have approved of. She didn't have the authorization to do that type of thing. So her role in this effort would have been minimal or administrative almost than anything. I think the reason the deal fell apart was just because it was untenable given the ad hoc nature of so many of the relationships and the piss poor communication that existed. Whether or not talent could get across the border, visa issues were a constant problem, even on Nitro. That issue was a constant issue. Talent being less than honest about schedules and who they were working and what they were doing. Because I had talent that was exclusive to WCW that weren't supposed to be wrestling in Mexico. Not that I didn't want them to satisfy their fans or even have opportunities in Mexico, but because if I'm paying someone $2 or $3 or $4 or $500,000 a year, I can't afford for them to get injured while they're working for somebody else and not be available to me while I still have to pay them.
Right.
So there were times when, yes, I put limits on what talent could and couldn't do in Mexico. And sometimes culturally, they just didn't understand that. And it was an issue. All of those things combined are probably what led to this decision of just saying, fuck it, it's not worth it. It's not tenable, manageable.
A week later, it continues to evolve. Meltzer would say Sharon Sadello put together a new deal with WCW. It was a verbal agreement to provide them with programming. And after the first Telemundo taping, David Crockett, Craig Leathers, and Annette Yoder convinced Eric Bischoff that it was terrible and they shouldn't do any more. Meanwhile, Tony Schiavone talks about WCW's good relationship with NBC on Nitro on Monday night, because people in the company are under the assumption they're going to be getting regular NBC specials after the NBA season ends. We've not heard any firm dates or a firm deal, but February 14th in prime time, that was the original plan. NBC would have their first WCW special. There would have been an NBA game in the afternoon, and then something with WCW. And even when the whole NBC thing went down, NBC never officially confirmed the story, but everyone in WCW was told. Buildings were booked for dates over the next year. Booking plans were being
Oh my
formulated.
God, I can't take any more. That's just so much. I mean, I can't comment on Dave's fantasy writing.
How did this really get sideways?
We've talked about it. There was I did have a good relationship with executives at NBC. One in particular by the name of Gary Conson. I know I've talked about a lot on this show. Because of an NBA strike, Gary reached out to me and said, "Hey, we need content. We need programming. What do you think? Could you come up with something?" We did. I pitched it to Gary. I pitched it to NBC. They loved the idea. They signed off on it. I had to take it to my boss, Harvey Schiller, at the time. And Harvey Schiller had to take it to a guy by the name of Joe Uva. Joe Uva was the head of ad sales in New York. Joe Uva said, we don't want to do any business with NBC. And that one opportunity, there was no discussion about regular specials. That is Dave Meltzer bullshit, just like we're reading today. People are calling him out for his bullshit today because now people can. Everybody's got a platform. Dave doesn't have the luxury of sitting back in his fucking cluttered room like a hoarder, writing bullshit, making things up and putting it out there, because back then nobody had the ability to call bullshit. Now everybody does, and they do, and I'm here for it. But everything that Dave wrote about relative to the one-off special that we never got to produce because Joe Uva turned it down, was a Turner Broadcasting ad sales executive. That was the only conversation. We weren't booking buildings. None of that shit ever happened. It never was even talked about. It was a one-off special because of a strike.
And it didn't happen. Well, it's a shame that
it wasn't a shame. It was, by the way, it was another, you talked about, how did you feel after 13 weeks? This was a much bigger deal to me than Raw beating us again for a 13th or 14th consecutive time. This was a major deal. This decision by Joe Uva, Turner Broadcasting, not to take advantage of an opportunity to put a prime time special on NBC at a time when we desperately needed to be competitive and reestablish ourselves as a brand in the marketplace. The decision to not allow it to happen told me everything that I knew about the future of WCW at that point in time. Why would anybody come up with a reason why anybody would turn down such an amazing opportunity unless nobody wanted you to succeed in the first place? This was a glaring example of where WCW was going, and one of the reasons why, as I've said so many times, my frustration, my battles had nothing to do with WWE or creative. It had everything to do with what was going on in my own company. This is a perfect example.
Well, if you want to have everybody in your house talking about something that's a big deal, can we recommend BLUECHEW? It's fun for the whole family. Well, not really. But we'll give mom and dad something to do, and maybe add a few things to dad's honey-do list. BLUECHEW is a unique online service. It's got the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so plan ahead or just be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process to sign up couldn't be simpler, y'all. You sign up at BLUECHEW.com. You consult with one of their medical advisors. And once you're approved, you receive your prescription within a few days. So to recap, this is all done online. There's no visits to the doctor's office. There's no awkward conversation. There's no waiting in line at the pharmacy. And BLUECHEW tablets are made right here in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. BLUECHEW wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BLUECHEW.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BLUECHEW free when you use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BLUECHEW.com. The promo code is 83weeks and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BLUECHEW.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BLUECHEW for sponsoring today's podcast. Talk a little bit about your boy, Bret Hart. Meltzer would write, there's been some political infighting regarding the status of Bret Hart. A booking meeting was held this past week with the original idea to build towards Hogan versus Hart at Halloween Havoc this year. At the meeting, it was suggested by Page that Hart put over Booker T, since Booker T had put Hart over 3 times on TV. Hart felt if the idea was to build up a match with Hogan, it wasn't the right time to put over Booker T because it would only devalue the big match before it got there. Nash feels that Hart isn't over and shouldn't be built up for the match to begin with. Nash and Hart's discussion ended with Hart confused because all that was suggested is him putting people over. And Nash was mad because all Hart was concerned about was building up a match with Hogan. It wound up with Nash telling Bischoff that Hart wasn't being cooperative about putting people over and Hart not understanding what it is the company wants from him. The end result is that Hart was booked to lose the title to Piper right away. And most likely Piper would drop it to Hall in Oakland. Man, there's a lot of rumor and innuendo here. Do you remember Bret and Nash coming to an impasse over creative?
There was definitely, there wasn't a good relationship between Bret and Kevin creatively. I think there was a personality conflict there. I think there was a certain amount of resentment, baggage that both of them brought to WCW from WWE. I think there was a lack of respect, probably on both parts in certain ways. So I can see where there was a conflict. There wasn't great chemistry to begin with. And usually you put 2 high profile people, successful people in a room where they don't have good chemistry, chances are there's going to be a conflict. And there certainly was here. The details, as the way Dave laid them out, were funneled to him probably by Bret, I would guess.
Yeah.
Not Kevin has the same level of disdain for Dave Meltzer as a lot of people in business does, but Kevin never had to use Dave Meltzer the way others had to use him or chose to use him. So yeah, there was probably an issue there. I can see the chemistry being bad. I wasn't involved in that discussion or those decisions. I never recall. Look, I had conversations with Kevin with regard to creative and booking. I pretty much gave him the book. I had to keep eyes of what was going on, and we would have conversations. And it was clear to me that there was just a disconnect between Bret and Kevin, but the details of which, especially coming from Dave, I can't comment. It's 99%.
We do know they're talking about the US title, and Bret would wind up dropping the title to Piper. And Meltzer would say that Piper's hip that he's had surgery on is acting up and he's going to need another surgery, and his other hip's going bad. So he's in constant pain, but even suggests one of the ideas floated was Piper teaming up with Will Sasso from Mad TV and Bret Hart teaming up with you, Eric Bischoff, for a tag match. It doesn't happen, but
never heard of that one before. Wow.
We wind up seeing Piper take the belt off of Bret there in Buffalo on Nitro. And well, there's going to be some criticism about the booking. The bloom is already off the rose when it comes to morale. The biggest complaints are, and this one is valid, WCW has made it almost impossible to be a babyface because the role of the heels is to try and be cool baby faces, but the baby faces are just presented as dumb saps to be constantly outwitted. The other is only the same guys with political pull in all the videos and nobody else. whether they get crowd reactions or not, is given the opportunity just like before. This feels like the same old song in WCW. People are unhappy with their spot, and maybe there's still some hurt feelings over the way the NWO was presented. Do you think it was increasingly difficult to be a babyface in this cool heel era?
It was increasingly difficult to be a babyface or a heel in this particular era. We're talking about 1999. Nobody was nobody was getting over, nobody was progressing, nobody was building. Everybody was in a state of self-preservation because we were losing so much ground. And creative was an issue. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Creative wasn't good. So it was hard for everybody. And to report that it's because of the NWO, which by the way happened in fucking 1996, 3 years earlier. Was that an issue in 96 and 97? Did the baby faces have an issue trying to figure out how to get over in this new paradigm of heels and the NWO that in some cases were getting cheered, in some cases were getting booed? Yes. Was it an issue in 1999? No, pretty much everybody had gotten used to it or over it by that point. Issues and the frustration and the morale issues, which I do admit existed in 1999, weren't a result of anything that was going on in the NWO or how baby faces were treated. It was just an overall kind of condition of malaise. It was everybody was feeling the pressure and the frustration across the boards, not just with baby faces, not just in general.
Let's talk a little bit about Wildcat Willie. My man got fired.
I never thought I'd hear that on a podcast.
My man, Wildcat Willie, I got to admit, up until like 5 years ago, I did not know he was called Wildcat Willie because it stood for WCW. I do know this outfit, or there is an outfit like this at AFX Studios just outside of Atlanta. So if you want to live out your Wildcat Willie dreams, hit up Andre Freitas there. He can hook you up. I guess you saw him trying to do his thing and the crowd shit on it one too many times. And you were like, this is a waste of money. My budgets are changing. Let's do something else.
Yeah, it just wasn't working. You know, I'm not so sure that it worked. That was Bob Dew's idea.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a bad idea. I mean, it really, at the time, it kind of made sense. It made sense on paper and it didn't hurt anything. And if certain people were entertained during the commercial breaks and the crowd warm-ups before the show and that kind of thing, no harm, no foul. Probably added value to some extent. But I think as times changed, the product changed, the audience changed, need for Wildcat Willie became less and less and less every week. It was just time. Good idea at one point, but it no longer applied. And you're probably right. I don't know specifically that I sat down and looked at budgets and go, okay, well, we got to cut Wildcat Willie because we're paying him $75,000 a year and all of his air. Maybe that happened. I think more than anything, we just recognized that the idea was served its purpose and it was time to move on.
I know we're talking about a guy who lost his job here, so I don't mean to poke fun, but it has been 25 years. So hopefully he's over it now. When you had this uncomfortable conversation with him, did you make him keep the head on?
You're like, what?
Was he wearing the mask? Did you make him? Throw Wildcat
Willie.
Willie.
Why would I do that? Why would I do that? What about me makes you think that I would say, hey, I'm going to have to fire you, but I'm going to get my kicks off?
Well, you threw coffee on Eddie Guerrero. I'm just saying, maybe hey, Wildcat Willie, that's it. Pack your shit, Skippy.
You know what? If he would have pissed me off the way Eddie pissed me off, I might have made him wear his fucking outfit while I fired him just to dehumanize him a little bit more. But I didn't feel the need. I didn't.
Let's throw Wildcat Willie back up on the screen, Silva. Tell me you saw the movie Teen Wolf. Michael J. Fox.
I don't think I did. I've never been a horror fan.
It's not a horror movie.
Not?
It's a silly comedy. Go through on your Google machine, Teen Wolf. That's what this shit was.
Does that look like it?
Dude.
Does he look like Teen Wolf?
Yes. It's silly. And to know that you looked at that man, well, that Teen Wolf, I suppose, Wildcat Willie, wearing that helmet, wearing the sunglasses, wearing the bandana. Why don't you have a seat, Wildcat? We got some bad.
We're gonna have it here. Here's some Purina Kitty Chow. Sit down and let's have a conversation.
I mean, you're featured endeavored Wildcat Willie. That's
actually, I don't even know if I let him go.
You just moved his office to the basement and took his stapler?
No, I mean, he was let go. I just don't think I was the one that did it.
Oh, you did it. We know there was a FedEx involved.
No, I wouldn't have wasted a FedEx. I might have just, his FedEx was like $14.95 at the time. It might have had David Crockett do it. Who else could have done
You probably just went to the back where the boys see all the matches about, who the agent is and how many minutes they got and all that. And you just wrote, "Get out, Wildcat Willie." Yeah. Pack your shit.
Fuck that cat.
Yeah. He knew when his catering changed. It's all downhill for him. That's always step one. Okay, listen, this is some silliness. Let's talk about, there's Teen Wolf. Telling me that ain't Wildcat Willie? Michael J. Fox.
I would have put that guy in the ring. He'd have had matches.
Michael J. Fox can't wrestle. So, he's got some health issues. Listen, let's talk about February 15th. It's a Nitro, and Dave Meltzer wrote, "This new concept is a loser. I can't just express how screwed up this company is right now. The February 15th Nitro may have been the worst episode in show history. It was held at the 2,500 seat Steinbrenner Pavilion. The show is a favorite of Steinbrenner for political reasons due to the Steinbrenner-Schiller connection, as WCW passes up a Monday where it could make anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 at the gate. And as it turned out, Steinbrenner himself didn't even attend the show. He was at the ESPN Awards. And there was finger pointing everywhere after the show, according to Meltzer. As the story went, at least believed by many wrestlers, there was a booking meeting in Tampa on the 16th, which is the next day. It was said to have been plans that are going to be made to bury certain wrestlers. That makes me laugh. In particular, Bret Hart, Roddy Piper, Conan, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Raven Canyon, Chris Jericho, and Bam Bam Bigelow for various reasons. Hart and Nash came out of a previous booking meeting with Heat, and Nash tried to get the word out that Hart wasn't a team player. There's also finger pointing going down among the big three in power, which are Bischoff, Hogan, and Nash. DDP, still having power based on being friends with Bischoff, is clearly losing ground to both when it comes to popularity and reputation that his booking ideas are usually only for himself and his friends rather than spreading it across everyone. Of course, the same could be said for Nash. Boy, this makes me laugh. The idea that, process this, boys and girls. This is the way it's written. This is what we're led to believe. And I want to say, I'm a lifetime subscriber to The Observer and love his work, but occasionally he gets things wrong, as we saw this week. But never in the history of ever has there been a meeting in some fucking hotel banquet room where there's a row of tables at the front. Doors are propped open and there's a little sign in the hallway, and Eric welcomes people. Yep. Come on in. Yep. Come on in. Yep. You're in the right spot. Have a seat. We got some coffee in the back, some water. Yep. I put butter in my coffee. I'm fucking weird. Come on in. Have a seat. Have a seat. Yep. All right. We're gathered here today to talk about how we can bury talent that I hired and pay on a weekly basis, but I don't like them. Don't want them here anymore. Not trying to make money with them, but I'm not going to Wildcat Willie their ass because that'd make too much sense. So instead, we're going to waste Bret Hart, one of our highest paid wrestlers. That's right. Going to fuck him around. Get the shovels out. Then we're going to do that with Roddy Piper. Cocksucker ain't got but one hip anyway. Oh, Conan, fuck him. He fucked me around on that Telemundo deal. He's out of here. Chris Benoit, you don't even want to know what the future holds for him, but you'll get while we're burying him. Then there's Dean Malenko and Raven. That motherfucker has different sized boots. Who could respect that? Canyon, innovator of offense, innovator of what? Killing the fucking ratings. Get him out of here. And then Jericho, get the fuck out of here. Everybody knows I don't want Jericho here. Bam Bam Bigelow, that goof's got tattoos on his head. Let's just run all these guys into the ground. I know I can fire them just like that and save the money, but I'm a fucking goof. And I have secret meetings the day after TV so I can decide amongst my friends that I pay to be my friends how we're going to fuck everybody individually and collectively. This is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever read, Eric.
Conrad, we've been doing this show for 5.5 years, give or take a month or two.
Feels like longer.
Not to me, because this is one of the most glorious moments I've ever experienced in front of a microphone.
So dumb.
Throughout my entire career. Not just the 5.5 years we've been working together on 83 Weeks to make it one of the most successful wrestling-related podcasts in that universe, but that diatribe was a work of art, music to my ears, and soothed my soul. To hear it coming from you, acknowledging because you are friends with Dave Meltzer, and why you admit you subscribe to it is beyond me. Why anybody subscribes to that direct is beyond me, but I get it. But now people are starting to see, like you, have finally cut through relationship clutter to understand that this is a twisted fraud of an individual who has done damage to not only the business in general, but individuals within it, to simply, I don't know, make himself feel important or convince people that he has knowledge or experience or relationships. Doesn't really have. It's funny because Dave often refers to people as con men, and I can't, you know how people tend to project?
Yeah.
No. To me, that is the most obvious projection. I'm not like a dime store psychiatrist or psychologist, but it's so obvious that this is a guy who's got real issues. And your entertaining example of it warms the fucking cockles of my heart. Thank you.
There's just no scenario where you held a meeting on your fucking off day.
First of all, if I would have said to anybody, I want to have a fucking booking meeting the day after a Nitro, you know how many people would have showed up?
You.
Me and Janie.
Yes.
Would have been the only two there. Nobody's doing a booking meeting. I would have never thought of having a creative meeting the day after a Nitro. It ain't happening.
The idea that hey, let's get together and figure out how we're going to fuck the guys around. Now,
but do you see how that's consistent with so much of Dave's narrative?
Well, here's what maybe happened. When guys were headed to their gate at the airport in Tampa, they saw Kevin Nash holding court at the bar, cracking wrestling jokes, telling wrestling stories, being charming, fun Kevin Nash. There's two Kevins. You get the grumpy Kevin, and you can get the social butterfly Kevin. Social butterfly Kevin is hard to beat, and he's damned entertaining. And if he's busting balls like he would, because let's run through there. Have we heard he had issues with Brett? Yes. Have we heard he had issues with Piper? Yes. Have we heard he had issues with the quote unquote vanilla midgets? Yes. Did he have issues with Bam Bam Bigelow? Yes. Guys saw Kevin Nash having a few cocktails telling stories, and they turned it into a telephone game with Dave Meltzer. Oh, he's having a booking meeting burying guys. What? No, he's not. Are you serious? There's no scenario where that happened. It's just, that's not the way it happens, guys. By the way, you know, you've been critical of Tony Khan. I hate that we're interjecting a little AEW conversation in here, but people were razzing on him after Wednesday night. It was their 200th episode of the show. And the production team, the graphics guys, threw up a graphic on their Tron. It didn't air on television, but it said, "Thank you, Tony, for 200 episodes." And smartasses online said, "Boy, when WWE thanks the audience, Tony Khan thanks himself." And I'm like, guys, do you think Tony Khan made that graphic or ordered that graphic or knew that graphic was coming? And I got a lot of people who decide they knew more about how wrestling works backstage maybe than I do. And they were like, "You telling me that there was a graphic that Tony Khan didn't approve?" Yeah, motherfucker. Who's got time to approve every graphic? He has a production. You know, there's a whole truck of people out there working, right? I mean, there's people scattered all over the earth doing graphics for this company. You think Tony Khan's in there running fucking Photoshop? What's wrong
And
with
by the way, there's a director by the name of Mike Mansouri, who this seems like something Mike would have done.
It's a nice gesture.
The fact that you pointed out that it didn't even happen on television
No.
is an example of why I like to fuck with people on social media, because the sheer levels of stupidity are nothing less than highly entertaining. And I can't help myself fuck with those people. Now, you were probably kind and gentle the way you pointed out stupidity in some of those comments, because like you, I don't believe that Tony actually said, "Hey, would you guys do me a favor?
No.
I know I'm getting a little bit of heat in social media. Would you put up a sign that says, 'Thank you, Tony'?" I don't think that happened. I think much like you, far more likely, Mike Mansouri or somebody who worked in the truck said, "Hey, let's just say thank you, because by the way, our checks clear every 2 fucking weeks and they're huge. So let's thank the man."
I'm sure it went something like this, Eric. "Hey man, did you realize this week is episode 200? No way. Is it really? Yeah. Well, are we going to acknowledge that on TV? Nah, Tony didn't want to. Well, shit, let's just thank Tony after the show. I'll just change it to say, 'Thank you, Tony.' Oh, that's a good idea. So we'll send the guys out and they'll all clap. Man, that'll be a nice gesture for Tony." That was it. This shit didn't happen on TV. Like, the idea that, I guess these same fans think, Eric, that, well, that was a graphic. I'm sure Vince McMahon approved it.
No, but see, that's what Dave Meltzer would do, right? This is a Dave Meltzer type story. You throw a little bit of dirt out there that makes no fucking sense. Well, I heard from a guy that he works there, and this is what happened. This is the kind of bullshit that is distracting, at the very least, harmful in many respects, and add to the frustration and the negativity that people currently have towards AEW. I mean, if you look at any of the stories that are posted on, let's say, Wrestling Inc., for example, there's others, and then whatever the story is, good or bad, you go down and you read the comments.
Yeah.
It's like 80% negative now, where it used to be 80% positive.
I hate it.
AEW is having a hard time cultivating a positive public relations image within the wrestling audience, primarily because of Tony and some of the stupid shit that he's done. Here's one thing that gives me hope with regard to AEW and Tony in particular. Tony hasn't come out and made some of the same silly self-destructive comments that he typically does with regard to WWE. He's been very quiet on social media.
Said he doesn't want to talk about it.
That's good. That suggests to me that Tony's learning on the job, that coming out and exploiting situations and trying to take shots at WWE, even though they may deserve it, doesn't serve him well. It is not a good reflection on him right now. The fact that he's staying quiet suggests to me that he's learning, or someone is talking to him and he's listening, which is the same thing as learning. So that's a good thing.
Well,
the fact that and Tony's been overall pretty quiet on social media, and I think that's a good thing.
I know you don't know him, but I would tell you that in my experience, it's been my experience that Tony Khan has always been very classy in the way he handles tragedies and bad things that have happened. I just know behind the scenes, some of the things he's done for, like, the Briscoe family and other people who were a part of the team, who work behind the scenes and all that jazz. And I think he recognizes, hey man, Duncan on WWE about some of the horrible stuff we've heard recently, that ain't cool. That's just not very human. So I don't expect you'll see any of that.
That's good. He's learning, because he was pretty outspoken early on when some of this stuff was happening, taking shots at Vince, and he pumped the brakes. Yeah. Something happened definitively that caused him to pump the brakes. It's not like he wasn't doing it.
Well, the thing that happened was 67 pages. We all read it. I mean, I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm just saying, like, when you don't have all the context and you don't have all the details, and then when you do, you're like, oh, well, nothing funny about this. We can't
leave it alone.
And leave it alone. Let's talk about Goldberg Meltzer would write, and yet another example of one of life and wrestling's most perplexing moments. WCW told Bill Goldberg to go on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno on February 19th and issue a challenge to Steve Austin. And then they failed to follow up on their own idea for this major grandstand angle with their typically Weasley acknowledgement of it on the pay-per-view. And Nitro didn't even mention Austin's name. Goldberg himself didn't want to issue the challenge to Austin, feeling it might make him feel like a star beneath the level of Austin publicly, which, although he isn't something that WCW should put Goldberg in the position of looking like, since he's still the most marketable wrestler in the company. It was the idea of Eric Bischoff and Kevin Nash who ordered him to do it. And as usual, it wasn't well thought out since the original idea was for Goldberg to challenge anyone in the rival company. Boy, goodness gracious, you're getting the blame for this, but I know you have a history with the Tonight Show. What do you remember about this grandstand challenge from Goldberg?
It wasn't, trying to reflect back on the conversation I had with it. It was a passing thought. What are we going to talk about? What should we do? There was a lot of chatter about Austin and Goldberg. Goldberg is a ripoff of Steve Austin, all that kind of bullshit. So I think, probably there was some conversation about leading into it and having some fun with it, but it's not like I scripted what I wanted Bill to go out there and say. That's not kind of how that worked. I just don't think it was as much of a definitive plan as Meltzer has suggested in that I ordered him to do. I don't order people to do shit. Never did. I ordered Rey Mysterio to take off his mask. That was about as close as I've come to an order. So again, it's a narrative. It's the way it was positioned. Dave is making a much bigger deal out of it than it actually was in our conversations. I'd have to hear Bill's side of that story to comment on it any further, because you can't comment on bullshit other than just saying it's bullshit. And there may be enough truth to this or enough actual, a small percentage of fact in this to make me question it. But overall, I say it was highly overstated once again by Meltzer to create a narrative that they wanted to.
Maybe you did it in the hotel banquet room the day after Nitro when you kept everybody in town. Talked about how you had a special meeting to figure out how to bury Canyon and Bam Bam Bigelow. Can you imagine? Hey guys, it's my off day. Let's figure out how we're going to fuck over Canyon and Bigelow. We got to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. In particular, and I had such a good relationship with Chris Canyon. It's not like that was somebody I would have fought for.
Nuh-uh.
That's right.
You were burying
Dave's
him.
Right.
You held a meeting. You
held it back.
You noted the minutes like it was a corporate meeting. Talk about the show. SuperBrawl IX, we're finally here. And it's sold out. 15,880 fans are here, paying an incredible $550,651. Another $118,455 in merch. It was sold out weeks ahead of time. And of course, Dave Meltzer says, well, this is a bad thing. The show exemplified WCW's biggest problems. The fact the public is seeing it as a seniors tour and that nothing is being done to change that perception. And nobody believes there's a possibility of clean finishes in big matches. As once again, when Flair put the figure 4 on, even before David Flair came out of the curtains, all heads turned to the back rather than giving any attention to the ring where a world title match change was seemingly on the verge of taking place. So let's talk about that just for a minute, because I do know that was a criticism that you were too reliant on old stars and you didn't make new stars. And I hear you. I would always challenge that with, what about DDP? What about Goldberg, et cetera, et cetera. However,
Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero,
Rey Mysterio, on and on.
Rey Mysterio, yeah.
But still, it's hard to argue with the success. I want to remind everybody, we said this was the third highest grossing or most sold WCW pay-per-view in history. As a reminder, before that was the case, the number one of all time originally for WCW was Bash at the Beach 94 with Hulk Hogan and Flair. And then they beat it with Hulk Hogan and Sting. And then they got real close with Hulk Hogan, Goldberg, and 2 NBA players. And now we're back again with Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. The common denominator in literally everything I said is Hulk Hogan. So I know that Eric gets a lot of criticism for being one of Hogan's boys. No, ATM Eric gave Hulk everything he wanted. I just rattled off the top 4 pay-per-views. Hulk Hogan's in all of them. So we can say, oh, it was this and it was that. What it was hugely fucking financially successful. And that can't be debated. But I do think he's on to something where maybe we had gotten a little convoluted with our finishes, maybe a little too predictable. Maybe we had lost some of our sarsa. And you've even said before that finishes became a real problem in WCW to the point where in the main event that everybody paid to see and sold out weeks in advance. And it's now the 3rd biggest of all time in WCW history with the benefit of hindsight. When Flair hooks on the figure 4, they're not watching the match. Now they're like, oh, who's coming down the ramp? Somebody's coming. Had you done too much of that at this point, do you think?
Clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't look back and analyze what we were doing and where we were at this particular point and not recognize that. The finishes were always a weakness in WCW prior to me getting there as a talent in 91. During the time I was a talent, all the way up until 93 when I became executive producer, all the way through 94, 95 when I became vice president. By 95 had a voice, a large one in creative, all the way through 96 and 97 when my voice got even louder and I had even more control and confidence to challenge decisions that I previously might not have challenged because of my lack of confidence when it came to creative. Throughout that entire period of time, when Ric Flair was the booker, when Dusty Rhodes was the booker, when there was a combination of people on the booking committee, which, you know, we'll laugh about booking committees today like it was something that never existed before. It still exists today, folks.
Yes.
You call it a writing team, you can call it a creative team. It's a fucking booking committee. No matter what you call it, it's the same thing.
Yes.
But throughout all of those iterations of creative influence and control, WCW never had anybody that was good at finishes. Finishes were always an afterthought at best. And, well, that's the best way to say it. At best, they were an afterthought. It's just a way to end the match. And sometimes there were great stories leading into those matches. The finishes detracted. There became a term, vernacular, that became commonplace within the internet. Well, the dirt sheet wrestling community or the internet. A dusty finish became an adjective because we saw it so often where there was a convoluted or compromised finish, really, to try to keep everybody. It wasn't like lack of ability or lack of passion for a good finish. It was a belief that keeping everybody healthy was healthy storyline wise and is the best way to continue telling stories. I don't know if it was ever articulated exactly like that, but have to kind of surmise that that was the thinking because it happened so consistently. And yeah, it was always an issue. But it was interesting that you pointed out something there too, where we got into we conditioned, we've often talked about, well, you hear it talked about in television production meetings, for example, where we want to precondition the audience right before the show. We're going to go out, we're going to warm them up. We're going to do something or say something that's going to plant a seed that we think will cause a reaction that we want during the show. That's conditioning the audience, preconditioning the audience. We had inadvertently preconditioned the audience to reflexively look at the entrance for the run-in during the finish because we did it so many times that they expected. It's interesting you pointed that out, and we were guilty of that. It worked for a while. It worked great. 96, 97. Leave the show with heat. Leave the show wide open so people had to tune in to see what was going to happen. That formula worked extremely well for several years. and then it didn't. But by the time it didn't work any longer, unfortunately, we had preconditioned the audience to expect it and to not even accept a finish as an actual finish because they felt like there's another chapter coming. Yeah, mistake.
There's another chapter coming that's maybe not what you expect. I got to admit, when I sat down to watch this show back, I did not recall the way it started. A very attractive blonde woman in a hotel room asking what we want for room service. This is the debut of Tori Wilson. We've never seen her before, but here she is. And I'm not sure if that's a sword on the bed, but she's talking to an unseen man and she's asking if he's okay. She wonders if she's hurt him. And then he hands her SuperBrawl tickets. She says that's awesome. It's going to make her friends jealous. She suggests a shopping trip and then she leaves to change clothes. We know eventually we're going to find out that she's with David Flair. But what an interesting way to debut Tori Wilson here. How did you find Tori and how did we decide? I got an idea. What if we make her look naked in a bed and we open a pay-per-view with that? Wow.
I don't know where that creative came from. I did not have it. I don't think I had a hand in that. It doesn't look or sound like anything that I would have come up with. And I'm not going to dump it on anybody else, but I'm pretty sure I didn't have anything to do with that one. As far as where did we find Tori? Tori found us, I think, through Barry Bloom.
Wow.
I think it may have been because I think she was a fitness model.
That's right.
There was a guy who I can't remember his name right now, but he was with Gold's Gym and he had a great relationship with a lot of the talents. I think he was an executive at Gold's. So he managed different franchises around the country. Gold's Gym was a really hot property at the time. And because of this individual's connections to the wrestling business, I'll think of his name probably before the show's over. He had a relationship with her, and I think it's him who introduced her to Barry somehow. And I think it was Barry Bloom that introduced her. I think.
It's an interesting way to debut. Let's talk about the opening match here. Disco is trying to join the NWO. And he's out here taking on Booker T. Booker T is going to get a win here in 9 minutes and 19 seconds. He wins with the Harlem Hangover. Disco was not injured, although it did look pretty scary. I feel like we should take a time out right here and talk about, did you see the Sammy Guevara accident with Jeff Hardy on social?
Yeah, I did.
As a fan, I admit, I don't know fuck all about wrestling, but I wondered, do you think we see injuries like that happen because we're not getting as many reps as we did back in the day? I mean, these guys are working so infrequently now that they may only wrestle a handful of times a year versus once upon a time, you'd wrestle 4 or 5 times in a week. What'd you think when you saw the accident with Sammy and Jeff Hardy?
I very concerned for Jeff.
Yeah.
I mean, he took that knee right to the side of the face. I don't know where it actually hit him, but it looked to me like it just planted right on his cheekbone, his temple. And that's a lot of power coming down off. There's a lot of weight coming down off that top turnbuckle. And there's nowhere for Jeff's head to go. So fearful, clearly. I didn't really ask myself why, but I think your observation is probably mostly correct. I think part of it is too, because of the nature of what AEW finds appealing is so much of the high risk, justified, this is awesome chance, which usually are a result of something really, really high risk and stupid. That's what they're going for. And I think the sense that talent probably feels like they've got to go to an extreme to get over particularly because you're wrestling in front of 2,000 people on a television show. The audience isn't into your shit at all from the opening match on. It's like wrestling in front of a high school cafeteria crowd. That makes it harder for talent, and they push even further, and they do things that are even riskier to try to overcome that issue. But I think mostly it's the reps.
Yeah.
These guys are just not as tight and as sharp as they would be if they're on the road 3 or 4 or 5 days a week. It is an issue. And I don't know what, I think Dave Meltzer reported the finish went according to plan and it's not that big of an injury. I have heard substantially the opposite. It's a mess. It's a mess and it's a mistake. And somebody's going to get hurt. Seriously hurt. People get hurt all the time. You start taking knees to the head from the top rope. What's it going to take? Somebody going to need to die? Somebody's going to have to get brain injuries before somebody finally wakes up and goes, okay, we need to get a little better control over what we do and how we do it. I don't know. Hopefully not.
I want to mention neither you nor I are piling on Sammy Guevara. Accidents happen. I don't think there's any chance he intentionally hurt anyone. I just don't.
No.
Just want to be careful that we're not being reckless here. I think we all want the same thing. We want the performers to be safe. And we want these guys to go back home the way they left home. So we're pulling for Jeff and hopefully his broken nose and whatever else he suffered. He's backing at him sooner rather than later.
If all he's got out of this deal is a broken nose, he got really, really lucky.
No doubt. Next up, we've got Chris Jericho and Perry Saturn. Meltzer would say this match was a mix of very good spots, fast pacing, weak transitions, and bad brawling. If you're watching with us over on YouTube, can we just go back to that image of Jericho?
How awesome is that?
Not only that, but Ralphus. The way we got Ralphus dolled up, like this era of Jericho is so much fun. This might be my most favorite.
I was just going to say, can you think of a better era of Chris Jericho than this? I mean, he was at his physical prime, clearly. Not that only here. I mean, clearly his physical prime carried over into WWE for a long time. But I think at this point in time, between being in his physical prime, his creative prime, in my opinion, and he had such a free hand. That was all Chris Jericho. We knew it was happening. We allowed it to happen. We approved it, I guess. But this was generated by Chris. This wasn't me having input or Kevin Sullivan having input. Kevin may have had more than I did. But for the most part, Chris Jericho had carte blanche to a certain point. Couldn't book himself, or he would have booked himself in a main event with Bill Goldberg at one point. Probably still would have stayed with WCW if we'd let that happen, conceivably. But this was, without a doubt, Chris Jericho at his finest. Chris may beg to, or he would know better than I.
The original stip is that Saturn would have to wear the dress for 90 days, but in this match, it's pointed out by the announcers that Saturn's 30 days were up, and he was still wearing the dress. So not only is he
started liking it.
Yeah, not only is he wearing the dress, but so was Ralphus. It's a fun match, 2.25 stars. You're going to see some shenanigans, as we like to say. Dickinson recovers. He awards the victory to Jericho by DQ. 2.5 stars. So you're doing everything you can to convince Jericho to stick around, but he's not long for this world. Billy Kidman is here, as is his bride to be. He's going to get a win over Chavo Guerrero. This is for the Cruiserweight Championship. They go 8 minutes and 26 seconds. Meltzer would say that Kidman won with a shooting star press, but it was a disappointment. Then we get an interesting match. Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko taking on Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig. The idea here is we got, two of the best performers and former horsemen here on one side, taking on Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig, maybe former horsemen of their own. This is sort of rap his crap sort of deal here. Benoit is the best worker on the show with all of his realistic looking offense, according to Dave Meltzer. He says the finish of the match was pretty good with a lot of near falls and saves. The bell never actually rang to begin the second match, which was to begin after a 30-second rest period. Wyndham took off his belt, choked Malenko out with it, then lariated him and got the pin. I guess it was 20 seconds because it never really started, but boy, did it make Benoit and Malenko look bad. So, I don't know that everybody knows this, but Barry Windham's very tall in real life. And maybe that's what we're talking about here, that Malenko and Benoit were not necessarily the biggest guys in there with Barry Windham. Maybe that's exposed a little bit. He says, that when you book them like this, it's a killer. Malenko can get over because of his size, but the crowd was just not into it. They were dead. Do you think visually it always has to be a David versus Goliath type match if you have a size difference? Have we moved past that in wrestling? When did that change, or did it?
I don't know that it has. I think there's just different ways to do it. Does it have to be obvious? Does it have to be so on the nose and you're building everything off the size difference? No, I don't think that. I think, especially today, the nature of type of offense and high flying shit that we see and combinations of things that we see that we probably never saw till the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't think there's a cut and dry answer, but I also think that ignoring the size difference will take you out of the picture. It's got to be believable. And if you're Dean Malenko and you're 5'10" and you're 200 pounds, 210 pounds, and you're in there with Barry Windham, who's probably all of 6'5" and 260, 280. If you don't use that as part of your story and acknowledge the size difference and allow the smaller opponent to figure out ways to overcome it, and that's the essence of the match or the story, if you will, the psychology in the match, I think that's always going to be a requisite in a situation like this. I just think there's ways to address it today that probably weren't available because people back then. But I don't, what are you going to do? Ignore it? Does anybody believe it? Is there any chance anybody will believe what the story that's taking place in the ring if don't acknowledge the size difference in a David and Goliath aspect of it? I don't think so.
Next up, we've got Kevin Nash and Scott Hall teaming up to take on Rey Mysterio and Conan. Scott Hall is here replacing Lex Luger because Lex can't wrestle. He's had surgery to repair his torn left bicep, but he is going to be ringside along with Miss Elizabeth. Meltzer would say Hall sold for all of Mysterio Jr.'s flying moves until catching him with a fall-away slam. He was thrown around like a lawn dart until he made the hot tag. That hot tag didn't last long, as you can imagine. Mysterio hit some moves and Nash was selling it like he was dead. Elizabeth distracts the ref so Hall can use the outsider's edge on Rey, but Nash is on top of him for the pin. And Mysterio unmasks after the match. The crowd didn't react to it, the unmasking, like it was any big deal, although Shivani did try to play it up as if it was history in the making. Mysterio was a great one-man show here. 3.25 stars. And the fans didn't react like it was a big deal because it wasn't made to feel like a big deal. And in hindsight, you've said this before many times on the show, this is one you wish you had back, right?
Yeah, I do. Even if I would have, if somebody said you could have it back, you can have a redo, you still have to take the mask off. Making it feel like a big deal would have been a much better way to go. Here's what people need to realize. At that time, within the context, I thought that because Rey is a good-looking guy, he's telegenic, he's got a face for the camera, especially as a baby face, because by taking the mask off, he would be able to emote, communicate to the audience his emotions during the course of his match or even in an interview situation. Rey would connect better to the audience without a mask than he did with the mask. That was the reason I wanted to take the mask off, because I thought Rey would become an even bigger star or more relatable to certain segments of the audience, particularly kids. I thought that was a better direction with Rey than holding on to the tradition of the mask. That was my judgment call. I don't know that I was wrong. I think it could have been a better situation. Again, it didn't exist, but had WCW developed and had an established licensing and merchandising division, which we didn't have, we were reacting to things that were popular. If we would have had a mature and effective infrastructure for licensing and merchandising, I would have played off the mask. It would have been great if we were making money off of it, but we weren't. And since we weren't really generating any revenue in licensing and merchandising for the reasons I just suggested, and because I thought that Rey could become an even bigger star, because Rey's star was still ascending at this point. It wasn't like at his peak, he was ascending. And I thought, okay, he could become an even bigger star if he has the ability that everybody else who's a star has, is to use their face as a tool on television, because that's how it works, folks. That's how it works. Your face tells the story more than your missile drop kick off the top rope. It just is what it is. And that's what I was banking on. If I had to do it all over again, sure, I would have done it differently. Most importantly to me, and this has nothing to do with business really, I would have been more respectful to Rey Mysterio as a human being, because I didn't understand the relationship in the history that Rey had with the mask and its cultural relevance in the area that Rey really grew up as a professional in Mexico. I didn't relate to it. I didn't even try to. That's what I regret. But the actual decision and the reasons for making that decision, I don't regret. In the context of the time that I made them, I think I made a good decision. I just wish, knowing now, but I didn't know then, I would have handled it differently.
Well, these days, we don't have to worry about merch on our side, because I know where you can get a whole bunch of those Rey Mysterio masks. With us, we've got a brand new partnership with Fanatics in the WWE shop. So pick up some wrestling swag right now at shopwrestlingmerch.com. That's SHOP wrestlingmerch.com. We now have an official affiliate partnership with Fanatics, and that means you can shop with confidence for your favorite WWE superstar tees, hoodies, caps, belts, and more, all on the official WWE shop, which you can find at shopwrestlingmerch.com. That's a special link that will support our show, won't cost you anything extra. Same great products, same great pricing, everything you expect from Fanatics, but it helps the show whenever you check out shopwrestlingmerch.com. So if you're watching along with us on YouTube, just hit that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or be sure to check out the link below, and you'll get it hooked up. Shopwrestlingmerch.com is where you need to go. By the way, I should mention, in my real life, I'm helping people save money left and right over at savewithconrad.com, and I'd be excited to help you do this too. We've recently learned that credit card debt here in America is in the trillions. It's at an absolute all-time high. And if you're feeling like you're stuck making minimum payments, and you've got this crazy over-the-top interest charges with your current credit card company, I can help. SaveWithConrad.com. How about this for starters? No house payments for 2 months. If you haven't already, you don't have to make your March or your April payment. You're done until May 1st, and we can get rid of all your credit card debt just like that. We're routinely helping our 83 weeks listeners here save $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. But how much can you save? Find out right now for free by giving us a call toll free at 888-425-0105. Yes, that's really me. Yes, we'll answer. Ask for me at 888-425-0105. Drop me an email, Conrad@savewithconrad.com, or get a quick quote for yourself right now at savewithconrad.com. Again, you don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. And if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. But it's important to note at savewithconrad.com, we don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. You need a game plan, whether you're looking to buy a house, sell a house, get rid of some credit card debt, maybe add a man cave, put in a pool. And we've done all that. So we can answer your questions about saving money or about down payment or about credit scores. We want to be your mortgage advisor for life. If you've got a friend in the mortgage business, you know me. So why not hit me up? Savewithconrad.com. And let's get back to it. The big story coming out of the show, of course, is Rey Mysterio losing the mask. And we've talked about that in the archives as well. Maybe we needed to monetize the mask a little better here in WCW. So pick up a Rey Mysterio mask at shopwrestlingmerch.com. Next up, we got the TV title. Two big time stars here battling out for the TV title in 99 too. Scott Steiner and Diamond Dallas Page. Believe it or not, really good match according to Dave Meltzer. 3.25 stars. There's going to be a big pop here for Steiner winning. Page is going to be stretchered out here after the big exposed metal turnbuckle and then the Steiner recliner. Fans are chanting DDP sucks at him. We're still a couple of months away from him winning the world title the first time, but a stretcher job here for DDP against Scott Steiner. What do you remember of this one?
Not much, really. Page was excited about it. He's a team player. He was looking for ways to make it as good as he possibly could, which is typical Diamond Dallas Page. By the way, we're talking about Diamond Dallas Page. I want to shout out to DDP. I saw a video. I don't know if you've seen it
with Butterbean.
And I wouldn't even mind showing that perhaps next week when we're prepped for it. It's a little bit of a long video or podcast, but it's so amazing what Diamond Dallas Page is doing for other people, which has always been his nature. Page was always pushing. He was pushing for himself. Do not get me wrong. Page is the most consistent self-promoter I have ever met in my life. But he's equally as passionate about helping other people. And to see what Page has been able to accomplish outside of the wrestling ring in his second career, which is probably bigger than his in-ring career at this point. He's become so successful with DDPY yoga and all the other things that he's doing, but impact that he's had on people that we all know, have relationships with. But as we saw with Butterbean and the hell, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And if you haven't seen it, please search it out. It's really amazing. And Butterbean, I worked with Butterbean. I think Butterbean was a part of Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship Wrestling for a minute. And that's how I got to know him. What a wonderful human being he is. He's just a good guy. And to see Butterbean get a hold of his situation and work so hard and overcome it and working out again is just fascinating to me. Much respect, much love to Diamond Dallas Page for the respect and love he gives to others.
Well said. If you haven't already, check out that Butterbean video. You're going to love it. Scott Hall's here. He's going to be beating Roddy Piper for the U.S. title. They go 8 minutes and 19 seconds. Meltzer says, what can be said about Piper that hasn't been said? He was a zombie who could barely move out there. They traded eye pokes. Piper can't bump and looks so bad, blah, blah, blah. The gist is we needed to get the belt off of Brett. Kevin Nash wanted it off of him. Maybe Brett thought this is so I'm ready for the Hulk push for the world title. Whatever. Brett drops the belt to Piper and Piper immediately drops it. Kevin Nash's friend, Scott Hall, not being negative, just saying that's what happened. And it wasn't a great match. -1.25. Next up, we got Bill Goldberg wrestling Bam Bam Bigelow. Meltzer would say a week ago, this was booked to be a quickie. Bigelow came out to no music, so he appeared to be even deader than he really is. This was the deadest Goldberg match since his infamous match with Steven Regal. It went way too long, and while Goldberg sold his leg well, the match just made him another wrestler, and he can't get over as anything special in that role. The awkwardness in talking about the Tonight Show appearance by the announcers didn't help. All in all, this was a major step backwards for him, even though he was protected and won clean. They're saying this because they go 11 minutes and 39 seconds. Eric, why wasn't this a squash?
Don't know. Don't know.
Feels like bad booking, doesn't it?
It was clearly bad booking. That's what I'm saying. It's bad creative all the way around.
Yeah.
Possibly from the initial matchup. And Ben Bigelow had his own, he had a very strong opinion and was not afraid to express it. Probably a compromise, as is often the case when you have something that looks good on paper but sucks in real life. And Bill wasn't ready for an 11-minute match. That was one of the challenges with Bill. And it remained a challenge and probably still does to this day, or did when Bill was active, even as recently as his performances in WWE. Bill Goldberg never developed. This is not a knock. This is actually a result of Bill being such a phenomenal character and finding that niche of that super dominant character that didn't have to go out there and take 20 minutes to beat somebody. Just go out there and eat you. It's what got him over. It's what created the phenom that he was. But the downside of that is he didn't have a foundation where he could go out there and have a match that was different than the match that got him over. Have the tools in his tool chest. He was only comfortable doing a few things. And by comfortable, I mean knowing he was confident in going out there and being able to perform them well. He was not a chain wrestler. He was not great at selling. It made longer format matches a much bigger challenge for him. And perhaps knowing that this was not the right opponent for him, because Bam Bigelow had his own sense of what worked and what didn't, his character. It's not that he was wrong. He's a big dude. How's Bill going to go out there and just manhandle a guy his size? That didn't make sense either. So it was just a bad matchup. It was bad creative. Should have never put them together to begin with.
What's good creative is our main event. Hulk Hogan retaining the WCW title, pinning Ric Flair in 12 minutes. As we said, this was the third highest drawing pay-per-view of all time. So they run it back the next month at Uncensored. Here's how we got there. Flair works a semi-heel style since he's better at carrying people with it, according to Dave Meltzer. For whatever reason, Hogan was better than usual, although it was like watching a greatest hits of the 80s video. Flair does all of his signature stuff and they trade the hard chops. Hogan hit a chair to the head and a terrible second chair shot. And like the old Flair of the old era, Flair came up with a gusher. Flair came back with a series of low blows on his comeback. Then he gets the belt, gives Hogan one of the worst belt shots in history. After punching Hogan with the buckle, Hogan juices. And then Tori Wilson came to ringside to borrow a Flair phrase, I'll get it right. Looking as only she can look. She slapped Flair. She could be a marketing bonanza for WCW because she's fresher and more attractive than any of the women in the WWF. Although some could debate that, but for angle purposes, has more presence and can talk and deliver a line better than any woman in wrestling already. Since it's WCW, where every ball put right in their glove is still dropped, she probably won't be. Hogan misses the leg drop. Flair puts on the figure 4. David Flair comes out in a leather jacket, wearing an NWO red t-shirt with the taser and a ski mask over his head. And he zaps Flair twice and Hogan pins him. After the match, he unmasks and starts swapping spit with Tori. Boy, we're heavy on story here. We're involving the Nature Boy's son, his beautiful new girlfriend. Maybe she's motivation for turning on his dad. What'd you think of the execution here? Ric Flair's own son turns against him here and joins the NWO.
At the time, I was probably excited about it than I am now, or I would be now. It's just too cheesy and easy and just But at that time, I probably thought it was a pretty cool idea. having your son turn against you could have been a great story. Possibly. If David Flair had more experience and was better established with the crowd, and had we established a close relationship with David and Rick prior, done that effectively over a period of time, then that turn would have actually mattered some. But looking at it now, it's just like it's a finished version of cheap heat. It's just easy, low-hanging fruit that really didn't matter.
Talk to me about the Hulk Hogan chair shots. It's become a meme online. You know, Hulk Hogan was not a hardcore wrestler. He never had a reputation for being a guy who would take liberties or hurt people. And no one who ever saw him swing a chair would ever accuse him of that. Do you remember that ever being a discussion or a source of ribbing these Hulk Hogan chair shots that wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight?
Wow. Source of conversation or ribbing? No. Obvious to a lot of people? Yes. To me, I kind of dreaded, and we don't see a lot of chair shots anymore anyway. But to me, chair shots were always like either really brutal and too risky or hokey as hell. Very few people were good at them.
Right.
Very few that could be consistently good. I just never liked him. I didn't like it when Hogan did it. I didn't like it when anybody used a chair. I never found it aesthetically compelling. The fact that Hulk was probably on a list of 10 people who were effective with a chair, he might have been right around the bottom of that list because he was careful about it. He didn't want to hurt anybody.
Right.
To him, it wasn't worth it. And it showed.
Yes.
I would have preferred he never done it. But he did occasionally. Never really looked great. Maybe when he was younger, maybe in WWE. Not when he was in WCW. I hated chair shots. Anybody, especially Hulk.
Instagram a wrestling historian says, was Hollywood Hogan going to have another long title run in 99 if he wouldn't have had issues with his knees?
Probably not. Probably would have opted to engage the heart grows fonder factor and given him some time away and a comeback. That was the original plan going into Halloween Havoc later that year, was for Hulk to disappear for a while because we never, ever intended Hulk to be a regular feature on television. He was always intended to be an attraction. But as the NWO heated up and became more successful, we saw more and more and more and more of Hulk. But clearly by 1999, we all recognized we were running out of gas as far as the NWO was concerned, and we're looking for other directions. And I think giving Hulk time away to kind of reinvest in his attraction status was on the top of our minds. So I don't think there would have been any long-term run-in.
AWEX Archer wants to know, seeing the tag titles, I wonder what is Eric's favorite title design in WCW that isn't the big gold belt? Also, based on prestige, what is your favorite non-world singles championship from any company at any time? Heavy belt questions. Do any of the belts stand out to you in WCW?
No, other than the big gold belt, no.
Yeah.
Because I've never really been that fascinated or interested in the belts or their history.
Sure.
I think in terms of a title that made sense for me, the WWF Intercontinental title always seemed to be the gateway championship.
Yes.
For a long time it did. And the reason it stands out in my mind is because of that, because so few titles really do mean a lot or represent future opportunity. Obviously the world title does, but I always liked the Intercontinental title, because once somebody made it that far, you could start betting on them going forward. And that matters. That matters for storytelling, continuity. I've always respected that because of that. The rest of the belts and championships to me seem to be so interchangeable and afterthought that it was hard for me to get excited about them. Honest truth.
We'll do a couple more here and then we'll put a bow on this one. JBL Cena fan 2 says, why didn't WCW have 50 different Mysterio masks and figures and just push them to the moon? I love your show, by the way. I'm not being a jackass. You kind of touched on that.
I don't take it as a jackass comment. Look, we've talked about it before. I try to hesitate, or I hesitate to talk about things we've already covered, but WCW didn't really have a licensing and merchandising division. We did technically on paper, but the people in that department had very little experience, they didn't have the Rolodex. They didn't have the relationships in the industry to really maximize the opportunities that kind of exploded. Keep in mind, WCW before 1996, we were selling shirts, T-shirts at the arenas, and maybe the 900 line, but we didn't have any retail relationships. WCW couldn't get their merchandise into any retail locations. We didn't have any licensing opportunities with toy companies. If we did, they were minimal until about 95 or 96. And then it exploded. But by the time it exploded and there was this demand for WCW product, it took 2 years to develop the infrastructure, hire the right people, connect with the right vendors or the right customers or the right distributors. All that takes time. And by the time we finally got that in place, we were on a downhill slide. So it would have been nice had I had the foresight back in 94 to really invest in our licensing and merchandising. Keep in mind, it would have made no fucking sense to anybody that I reported to at the time. I would have been questioned. Why are you doing this when there's no demand for the product? I would have had to explain, well, that doesn't matter. I know there's no demand for the product, but I want to spend the money to do it anyway, because I was looking at my crystal ball while I was eating my Cheerios, and it said in 1996 and 97, there's going to be a hell of an opportunity. And there's this guy by the name of Rey Mysterio. I know we haven't heard of him yet, but he's coming. And when he does, he's going to be wearing a mask, and I'm going to take that mask off at some point. So in the meantime, why don't we have some masks for sale for this guy that we don't know yet? I'm having fun with that. But my point is, I just didn't see it coming. We didn't see the success of the NWO happening. We didn't see the explosion of Nitro happening, and we weren't prepared for it. By the time we got prepared for it, kind of had already missed the boat. It's the honest answer.
One last question. Joe wants to know, was SuperBrawl IX the last great WCW pay-per-view?
I don't know that it was a great pay-per-view. We had a pretty significant, we had significant success financially. I don't know that anything happened on that pay-per-view that makes me feel like it was a great pay-per-view, other than we sold 485,000 of the motherfuckers. That makes it a great pay-per-view. But artistically, creatively, no. I think it paled in comparison to some of the pay-per-views that we did in 97 and 98, even 96, possibly even 95. So no, I don't think it was a great pay-per-view, but I think it was the last example of what could have been WCW.
Well, we're going to talk about what could have been next week here on the show when we talk about whatever the hell you guys want to talk about. We're kicking it old school. We're going to a poll, and the poll is up right now at 83weeks.com. Cruise on over to 83weeks.com. That's our YouTube channel, and we've got a poll posted right there. I know in years past, we've put the polls up on Twitter. We're putting it on YouTube. We want to hear from you. So if you haven't already, go check out our YouTube. It's 83weeks.com. That'll get you there. Hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications bell. You never know when Eric and I are going to go live again, but we're planning to go live again very soon. Of course, this weekend we've got the Elimination Chamber. Before you know it, it'll be Ric Flair's last match. We'll have go home episodes for Raw and SmackDown before night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania. And we're going to be going live early and often over on YouTube. So if you haven't already, cruise on over, check out 83weeks.com. That takes you right to our YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, and vote for next week's poll. We want your suggestions. So vote in the poll and then go ahead and let us know what you want to see on next week's poll, and we'll crank it out, man. By the way, if you're looking to target men 25 to 54 years old, there's no better place to advertise than right here with us. Check it out at advertisewitheric.com. If you've got a question for the show, it's easy to ask us and find us on Twitter. He is at eBischoff on Twitter, at the real Eric Bischoff on Instagram. Our show is at 83 Weeks on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Lots of new swag available for you as well over at 83weeksmerch.com. We got I'm an Eric Bischoff guy. I'm back. Cody's the guy. The Ninja Stars. Heat is life. All that and so much more at 83weeksmerch.com. But if you haven't yet, go vote. Go subscribe. Turn on the notifications bell. 83weeks.com. Eric, we covered it all, man. WWE, AEW, WCW 25 years ago. We just clocked in at over 3 hours today, Eric. A bit of a marathon for you and I on a Sunday morning.
And we've been hitting that 3-hour mark pretty consistently of late. But before we go, I do want to remind everybody, if you're listening, you live anywhere near the Detroit area, this weekend, I'm going to be at the Great Lakes Comic-Con. Go to GreatLakesComicsConvention.com for tickets. We're going to be in Warren. There's so much great history in Detroit. I have not been back in a long time. This will be the first time I've had a chance to go back to Detroit. I'm actually going to have a couple of days on the front end to visit with family, which I haven't done in an embarrassingly long time. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm looking forward to seeing some of the fans there in Detroit. You know, I grew up watching wrestling. I cut my teeth on professional wrestling as a young kid, watching in Detroit on CKLW out of Windsor, Canada, big time wrestling. Bobo Brazil was my favorites at the time. Obviously, the Sheik. That's where I developed my relationship with professional wrestling. So in a way, I'm going back to the very beginning, and I hope to see a lot of wrestling fans there. GreatLakesComicsConvention.com for tickets. That's next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Check it out. I look forward to seeing you there.
That's this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Go see you at Great Lakes, and we'll see you next Monday right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.